Chapter 1143. Just as Qinchuan was about to follow everyone and take a detour, the little armored dragon raised a different opinion in Qinchuan's mind. It was protesting against Qinchuan's detour. "I want to eat it." Qinchuan was a little surprised when he heard the little armored dragon's clamor. What did the little armored dragon want to eat? Could it be the black armored ant? Qinchuan remained calm and collected on the surface, but he secretly began to communicate with the little armored dragon. He asked, "What do you want to eat, black armored ant?" In response to Qinchuan's inquiry, the little armored dragon nodded excitedly and replied, "Eat it." Qinchuan did not know whether to laugh or cry. He said to the little armored dragon, "That guy is an ancient dire beast, a prehistoric mutant. Are you sure you can eat it?" Although Qinchuan was still very confident in the little armored dragon, the black armored ant was an ancient dire beast after all. If it was not handled well and the black armored ant was angered, it would not be fun. However, in the face of Qinchuan's worries, the little armored dragon was full of confidence. It said to Qinchuan, "There's help." Qinchuan was slightly taken aback when he heard that. After thinking for a while, he asked, "The help you mention refers to the Tian people and the Protoss?" In Qinchuan's opinion, apart from the Tian people and the Protoss, no one else in the ruins was qualified to provoke the black armored ant. The little armored dragon said that there was help. Did it mean that it wanted to fish in troubled waters? Facing the excited little armored dragon, Qinchuan hesitated for a moment before asking, "Are you really confident that you can fish in troubled waters?" The little armored dragon nodded vigorously and replied, "Fish in troubled waters. Fish in troubled waters." Seeing how confident the little armored dragon was, Qinchuan, who had always been bold, immediately made a decision. He would temporarily leave the team and head to the area where the black armored ants were to help the little armored dragon fish in troubled waters. Thinking of this, Qinchuan immediately stopped moving forward. When the others saw Qinchuan stop, they also stopped and looked at Qinchuan curiously. Without waiting for Qinchuan to speak, Wu Hui asked, "Lu Chuan, what new discoveries have you made?" Qinchuan shook his head and said to the others, "My friend is in the Tian people's team. I'm worried about his safety, so I want to go to the black armored ants to check on the situation." Hearing Qinchuan's reply, Wu Hui frowned and said, "But this is too dangerous." They could understand Qinchuan's concern for his friend's safety, but if he were to take the risk to go to the black armored ants, it would not be in line with everyone's interests. Of course, Qinchuan knew that the others would not agree to a last-minute change in plan, so he said to the others, "I don't plan to be a burden to everyone, so I may have to act alone for the time being." Everyone's expression changed slightly when they heard Qinchuan's reply. Ame said, "Lu Chuan, your friend is in the Tian people's team. He shouldn't be in danger." Qinchuan shook his head and said, "He has done me a favor. If I can't see him safe and sound with my own eyes, I won't be able to rest easy." With that, Qinchuan took out the ancient direbeast's remains and said to Wu Hui, "I know that everyone is worried about the safety of the camp at night. I'll leave this ancient direbeast's remains to you for the time being. When I come back, you can return it to me." Hearing Qinchuan's words, everyone's expression could not help but become a little complicated. They did not want Qinchuan to take the risk. On one hand, they were thinking about Qinchuan's safety. On the other hand, it was because the ancient direbeast's remains were in Qinchuan's hands. If Qinchuan did not come back before night, they would be in danger. "Lu Chuan, that's not what we meant." "I know." Qinchuan chuckled and said, "I can see everyone's concern for me, but I have to do this. You just have to move forward in this direction, and I will definitely come back to look for you in the future." After saying this, Qinchuan did not give anyone a chance to speak. He turned around and left. Everyone watched Qinchuan leave. Their expressions were very strange. They had been in the universe for nearly 1,000 years, and it had been a long time since they met someone as loyal and affectionate as Qinchuan. Wu Hui took a deep look at the ancient direbeast's remains, then reached out and put it away. She said to everyone, "Let's keep moving forward and wait for him to come back." After leaving the team, Qin Chuan first disguised himself, then quickly rushed in the direction of the black beetle ant. When he arrived, he did not rashly approach it. Instead, he crouched in the grass and observed from a distance. At this time, the Tian people and the Protoss people had already surrounded the black beetle ant. However, they were not in a hurry to attack. Instead, they were discussing the distribution of benefits. In their eyes, the black beetle ant was already a turtle in a jar. There was no way to escape. "Lucas, this black beetle ant definitely has the strength of a late combination stage overlord. Let's work together and kill it. After we kill it, we'll each take half of its body." Thelon looked at Lucas and calmly said his plan for the distribution of benefits. It could be said that it was quite fair. Lucas smiled and said to Thelon, "I also have the same idea. Since no one has any objections, let's just do it. After we get rid of this big guy, we still have other things to do." Tai Long was not surprised to hear Lucas's words. Although the black armored ant was valuable, it was only an ancient beast at the late stage of the combination realm, after all. It was not worth it for both sides to go to war. Hence, it was best to share the benefits peacefully. At this time, thousands of rogue cultivators were scattered around the area. They were looking at the Protoss and the Tian people with envy. In the face of a late combination stage overlord, it was difficult for them to escape. However, for powerful forces like the Protoss and the Tian people, the black beetle ant was like a small toy that could be crushed at any time. Qin Chuan saw that the Tian people and the Protoss were about to attack, so he asked the little armored dragon, "What are you going to do?" The little armored dragon smiled, and did not answer Qin Chuan's question. Instead, it quietly left Qin Chuan's mind and left a shadow beside him. Then, it quickly rushed toward the black beetle ant under the cover of the grassland. Qin Chuan saw this and did not stop it. With the ability of shadow shift, the little armored dragon could safely return to his side even if it was discovered. There was no danger at all. While Qin Chuan was thinking about this, the Protoss and the Tian people had already begun to move. Unexpectedly, they did not send out any combination stage overlord. Instead, they sent out 100 Dongshu stage cultivators to form two large formations. They were ready to use the power of the formations to deal with the black beetle ant. The black beetle ant, which was surrounded by the two large formations, obviously sensed the danger. It wanted to escape, but it was obviously too late. The two large formations of the Protoss and the Tian people were like two precise gears, surrounding the black beetle ant and launching a powerful attack. Chapter 1144. Qin Chuan was a little surprised. The black armored ant was unable to fight back under the pincer attack of the two formations. What's going on with these two formations? They're so strong that the black armored ant can't fight back at all. Before the arrival of the Protoss and the Tian people, at least 800 Dongshu stage cultivators had died at the hands of the black armored ant. Now, the Protoss and the Tian people had relied on only 200 Dongshu stage cultivators to make the black armored ant lose its ability to fight back. The might of these formations was a little too frightening. Thinking of this, Qin Chuan couldn't help but think of the little armored dragon. He wondered how it was doing right now. While Qin Chuan was thinking about the little armored dragon had already sneaked up to the black armored ant's abdomen. It carefully looked around, and after making sure that no one was paying attention to it, it slammed its head into the black armored ant's abdomen. The black armored ant's abdomen was the softest part of its body. Of course, this softness was relative. If Qin Chuan were to attack the black armored ant's abdomen, he might not be able to break through it even after a day. However, if the little armored dragon were to do it, it would only need one bite to break through the black armored ant's abdomen. Crack! When the little armored dragon bit through the black armored ant's abdomen and drilled into its body, the black armored ant, which was suppressed by the two formations, suddenly began to struggle violently. It let out a sharp cry, causing the Protoss and the Tion people to be astonished. What's wrong with this black armored ant? It's trapped by two ancient annihilation formations. How could it possibly have a chance to break free? Thelon couldn't help but frown when he saw the black armored ant struggling violently. He felt that something wasn't quite right, but he couldn't pinpoint what exactly was wrong. The Protoss's reaction was the same as Thelon's. They all felt that something was wrong, but they couldn't pinpoint what exactly was wrong. They just felt that something was off. However, since the black armor ant was unable to break free from the pincer attack of the two ancient annihilation arrays, they did not care why the black armor ant was resisting. As time passed, the struggle of the black beetle ant did not stop. Instead, it became more and more violent, and its roars became sharper. Seeing the black beetle ant acting so crazily, the Protoss and the Tion people were suspicious, but they couldn't figure out what the problem was. At that moment, the two ancient annihilation formations finally wiped out the black beetle ant's life force completely. Just as the Protoss and the Tion people were about to divide the black beetle ant's corpse, something shocking happened. The black beetle ant's hard carapace actually shattered. Seeing this scene, Thelon was stunned for a moment, then he exclaimed, "This is impossible! The black armored ant's carapace is indestructible. How could it be broken?" Lucas was also shocked by the scene in front of him, but what shocked him even more was that there was no flesh under the black beetle ant's carapace, only its internal organs, and they were all withered beyond recognition. It was as if something had sucked all the essence out of them. "I've never heard of an ancient annihilation formation having such an effect," Lucas said in a deep voice. "What the hell is going on?" Thelon's face was gloomy as he said, "Could it be that this black beetle ant had no flesh from the beginning and was only an empty carapace?" Lucas frowned when he heard this. He was sure that everything was normal before they attacked the black beetle ant, and the Tion people didn't do anything during the attack. In that case, this was the only explanation that Thelon said. However, if the black beetle ant was just an empty carapace, then the power it displayed was a little too strong. While Thelon and Lucas were still puzzled, the little armored dragon had already returned to Qinchuan's side through Shadow Swap. Qinchuan was stunned when he saw the little armored dragon's body turn into the size of a football. "My goodness, how much did you eat? When you left, you were only the size of a fist, and now you've turned into a ball." Faced with Qinchuan's question, the little armored dragon was just about to open its mouth to answer when a stream of essence energy suddenly overflowed from its mouth. The little armored dragon immediately inhaled the essence energy into its stomach, then raised its chubby little hand to cover its mouth and refused to speak again. Qinchuan was stunned for a moment when he saw this and said, "Don't tell me you're stuffed?" The little armored dragon learned its lesson this time and didn't answer Qinchuan's question again. Its figure flashed and entered Qinchuan's brain. In the evening, seeing that it was getting late, Wu Heng and the others stopped their journey and found a suitable place nearby to set up camp. After they had set up camp, Wu Hui took out the ancient ferocious beast's remains and placed them at the side. When everyone saw the ancient ferocious beast's remains, their faces revealed complicated expressions. The sky had already turned completely dark, but Qinchuan had yet to arrive. Asye saw that everyone was a little quiet, so it smiled and said to everyone, "I'm going to take a look around. I won't go far." Hearing Asye's words, Wu Heng frowned and said, "It's getting dark now, you'd better not wander around. If you encounter the ghost bats, you'll be in danger." Asye was silent for a moment, then said to everyone, "I want to go back and look for LV Chuan. What if he catches up?" Hearing Asye's words, Wu Heng fell silent. As the leader of the team, he clearly knew that everyone's emotions were not right because of Qinchuan's departure, but he couldn't do anything about it. After all, ever since Qinchuan joined the team, he had always been a presence and had contributed a lot. Before he left, he had even handed over the only ancient beast's remains to them. Just thinking about it made him feel a little regretful. If only he had made the decision to go with Qinchuan to take a look at the black armored ant. Ah Xie, we're all very worried about LV Chuan. You're not the only one who's worried about him. Ah Mei glanced at Ah Xie and said, don't say such things in the future. It makes us seem like we're especially ungrateful. Ah Xie hurriedly shook his head and said, that's not what I meant. Alright, everyone, stop arguing. Wu Heng glanced at everyone and said, since everyone is very worried about LV Chuan's situation, let's move together. We'll carry the ancient beast's remains back and see if we can meet LV Chuan. Hearing Wu Heng's words, no one raised any objections. Just as everyone was about to carry the ancient beast's remains and set off, a figure suddenly landed quickly in the campsite. Who is it? Wu Heng looked at the black figure that had suddenly appeared. Just as he was about to attack, he saw the other party pull off his cloak. Hey, it can't be. I haven't seen you for half a day and you don't recognize me? Qinchuan grinned at everyone who was about to attack. I'm back. Chapter 1145. Seeing Qinchuan's true face, Ah Mei was pleasantly surprised. Lu Chuan. Qinchuan smiled and said to Ah Mei, fortunately, I ran fast enough. Otherwise, I wouldn't have been able to find you before the sky turned completely dark. Hearing Qinchuan's words, Nyoba laughed, stood up, and gave Qinchuan a warm hug, saying, if you had come back a little later, we would have gone to find you. Wu Hui looked at Qinchuan with a complicated expression, and said, welcome back. Ah Xie also grinned and said to Qinchuan, welcome back. Facing everyone's warm welcome, Qinchuan couldn't help but feel a lot of emotions. When he first chose to join this team, he actually had the mentality of making use of each other. He didn't really treat these people as teammates that he could trust. However, after yesterday's events and the conversation he secretly overheard, he felt that it was a good thing to be able to join such a team for a short period of time. I'm exhausted from running all the way. I'll lie down and rest first. Qinchuan said, and found a comfortable place to lie down next to the bonfire. Ah Mei saw this and asked with a smile, do you need any special service? Qinchuan looked up and glanced at Ah Mei, saying, forget it, you're not as pretty as my girlfriend. Hearing Qinchuan's words, everyone laughed. Only Ah Mei was angry and seemed to be very dissatisfied. However, she soon laughed as well, and the atmosphere could be said to be quite harmonious. On the other side, the atmosphere between the Protoss and the Tian people was not so harmonious. After a careful inspection, both sides found that the black beetle ant was not an empty shell from the beginning. Instead, when they used the formation to crush the black beetle ant, someone took the opportunity to devour its flesh and blood essence. That was why it became an empty shell. In the eyes of the Protoss and the Tian people, only they had the ability to secretly devour the flesh essence of the black armored ant right under their noses. As a result, both sides began to suspect and fear each other. After arguing for a while, they parted on bad terms. The Tian people continued to explore the grassland, looking for a way out. The Protoss, on the other hand, was preparing to contact the people they had arranged to keep an eye on Qinchuan. They were preparing to take action against Qinchuan. After a night of rest, Qinchuan and the rest began to move forward again. This time, after half a day of hurrying, they saw the border of the grassland, an endless mountain range. Do you see that mountain range? As long as we cross that mountain range, we will definitely be able to leave the grassland. Nyoba said excitedly. At the same time, everyone agreed. Everyone felt that the mountain range was the end of the grassland. They were looking forward to seeing with their own eyes what the world on the other side of the mountain range looked like. Involuntarily, everyone quickened their pace. As the saying goes, looking at a mountain is close to death. After continuously moving forward for a full 4 hours, they still could not reach the mountain range. As we get closer and closer to the mountain range, The mountain range is also getting higher and higher. Wu Hui frowned and looked at the mountain range in front of them. He said to everyone, "Let's speed up and try to get to the foot of the mountain range before it gets dark." Just as everyone was about to speed up, several figures suddenly rushed over from behind them. They looked aggressive, as if they did not come with good intentions. When everyone noticed the arrival of these people, their expressions immediately became vigilant. However, these people did not seem to notice them at all. They were cheering and rushing towards the mountain range. Seeing this scene, everyone was stunned for a moment before they understood. These people were also rushing towards the mountain range. The reason why they were so aggressive was obviously because they wanted to reach the mountain range as soon as possible and then leave the grassland. However, Qin Chuan did not think so. In his eyes, these people's behavior was very strange. It looked like they were rushing towards the mountain range. However, Qin Chuan's powerful spiritual power was sharp enough to capture that these people's attention was focused on him. These guys are coming for me. When he thought of this, Qin Chuan did not hesitate to take out the Qilin pen and inscribe the realm of 10,000 wood in the air. He took the initiative to attack, using the realm of 10,000 wood to surround those figures. Those people did not expect Qin Chuan to suddenly attack and were shocked. By the time they wanted to resist the realm of 10,000 wood, they had already lost the best opportunity to resist. When Wu Hui and the others saw Qin Chuan suddenly attack, they were all shocked by Qin Chuan's actions. Wu Hui subconsciously asked Qin Chuan, "Is there a problem with them?" Qin Chuan nodded and replied, "They seem to be rushing towards the mountain range, but in fact their attention is focused on me." Hearing Qin Chuan's answer, Nyoba frowned and asked, "Do you know them? Do you have a grudge against them?" Qin Chuan shook his head and said, "I don't know them, but as long as I interrogate them, I will naturally be able to get the answer I want." While speaking, Qin Chuan controlled the realm of 10,000 wood to send the bound figures in front of him and asked, "You are the Protoss's people, right?" Hearing Qin Chuan's words, the bound people were stunned. Their identities had been seen through just like that? Wu Hui and the others were also stunned. The people who had a grudge against Qin Chuan were the Protoss's people? Seeing the changes in their expressions, Qin Chuan already had an answer in his heart. He originally thought that it would take some time for the Protoss to find him, but judging from the current situation, his whereabouts were no secret to the Protoss. The Protoss had already sent people to follow him for a long time and had been monitoring his every move. "You clearly followed me from behind very well and did not expose yourself. Why did you suddenly rush out?" Qin Chuan looked at these people and said, "Are you worried that I will go to the other side of the mountain range and then lose track of me?" In the face of Qin Chuan's question, the Protoss's spies chose to remain silent. They would not answer any of Qin Chuan's questions. Qin Chuan sighed when he saw this. He originally wanted to spend more time with Wu Hui and the others as an ordinary person, but now it seemed impossible. If he continued to stay with Wu Hui and the others, it was very likely that they would be implicated. Qin Chuan knew that he would not be able to get any useful information, so he directly strangled these people with the realm of 10,000 wood. After doing this, he turned his head to look at Wu Hui and the others and said, "It seems that we can't continue to act together. My enemy has already found me. He is the Protoss's man. If you continue to stay with me, you will definitely be implicated." Hearing Qin Chuan's words, Wu Hui and the others' expressions immediately became complicated. Although they had already expected this result, they still found it difficult to accept in their hearts. Chapter 1146. As a rogue cultivator, no one would want to offend a powerful force like the Protoss. Lu Chuan, how did a rogue cultivator like you offend the Protoss? Mei looked at Qin Chuan in confusion. Is it because of your Tian people friend? In Mei's opinion, Qin Chuan was just a rogue cultivator. It was impossible for him to take the initiative to offend the Protoss. It was only because of his Tian people friend that he could have some involvement with the Protoss. Qinchuan nodded and said, "You can say that, but it's hard to explain." Qinchuan paused for a moment, then said to everyone, "Don't ask any more. Let's continue on our way. When we reach the mountain range, we'll split up. The Protoss target is me. If the Protoss finds you and asks about my request, you'll have to answer truthfully." Hearing Qinchuan's words, everyone who still had many questions in their hearts couldn't help but fall silent. Everyone's expression was a bit complicated. Although they had only known Qinchuan for a short 2 days, they had already regarded Qinchuan as their friend. But in the blink of an eye, their friend was about to leave. No matter how reluctant they were, they couldn't make him stay because they couldn't afford to offend the Protoss. On the way to the mountain range, everyone was silent. Qinchuan didn't have the mood to adjust the atmosphere. He just wanted to cross the mountain range as soon as possible and disappear from the Protoss's surveillance. Finally, before night fell, everyone finally reached the foot of the mountain range. Looking up at the majestic mountain range, everyone's mood was both excited and sad. They were excited because they would be able to enter a whole new world after crossing this mountain range. They were sad because it was time for them to say goodbye to Qinchuan. Qinchuan was never a sentimental person. Without waiting for the others to speak, he chuckled and said, "Actually, we've only known each other for 2 days. We're barely good friends. Now that we're about to part ways, I don't have anything good to give you, so I'll just give you the remains of the ancient ferocious beast." To Qinchuan, the greatest use of the remains of ancient beasts was for the little armored dragon to devour. Now that the little armored dragon was about to explode from eating the black armored ants, it was useless even if he kept it. Since that was the case, he might as well give it to Wu Hui and the others. Hearing Qinchuan's words, no one knew what to say, nor did they know how to face Qinchuan. However, Qinchuan didn't care about this. After all, these people were his companions, and they would definitely be noticed by the Protoss. The remains of the primordial beast were his compensation for these people. With this, he could leave in peace without worrying too much. Qinchuan took out the remains of the ancient ferocious beast and placed it in front of everyone. Then, he turned around and disappeared into the night. Seeing Qinchuan leave, Mei said with a complicated tone, "I didn't even have time to say goodbye to him." Wu Hui sighed and said, "When it's time to meet again, we'll naturally meet again." After leaving the group, Qinchuan didn't have any intention of spending the night at the foot of the mountain. He chose to directly enter the mountain and cross the mountain range as quickly as possible, then go to the other side of the world. The mountain range was very majestic and tall. Qinchuan originally wanted to fly directly over it, but the sky above the mountain range was a restricted area. Even a body integration stage overlord couldn't fly. Helpless, Qinchuan could only enter the mountain forest from the ground. He leaped onto roofs and vaulted over walls, quickly climbing up like an agile monkey. Qinchuan was mentally prepared to encounter all kinds of dangers. However, to his surprise, there was no danger along the way. The entire mountain forest was quiet and there was almost no sound. After advancing for a while, Qinchuan frowned and stopped. He completely released his mental strength and sensed the surrounding environment. The feedback from his mental strength clearly told him that all of this was not an illusion, but reality. Why is there not a single living thing in this mountain forest? Only trees? Qinchuan looked around. Not to mention small animals, there wasn't even a mosquito. This was really abnormal. However, Qinchuan only pondered for a moment and then continued on his way. No matter what was in front of him, he had to move forward unless he wanted to go back the way he came. After climbing for most of the night, Qinchuan finally arrived at the top of the mountain. He stood on a big tree and looked into the distance. He fell into deep shock when he saw the vast world on the other side of the mountain range. It was a city built entirely out of boulders. The tall and majestic walls were filled with traces of the vicissitudes of time. Faintly, Qin Chuan seemed to be able to hear the grand sound of a bell coming from the city. The ancient charm was endless. The walls of this city are integrated into one. Could it be that an entire mountain range was hollowed out to build this city? Qin Chuan looked at the city in shock. He felt as if something in the city was calling out to him. He couldn't help but want to enter the city to find out what it was. Whoosh! Qin Chuan quickly swooped down the mountain. The path down the mountain was much easier than the path up the mountain. Soon, Qin Chuan arrived at the foot of the mountain. At this time, the sky was already bright. Qin Chuan knew in his heart that at this time, there should be a lot of people starting to climb the mountain. He wanted to enter the city before everyone else. The city occupied a huge area, comparable to 2 Telung capitals. Therefore, although it looked very close, Qin Chuan took half a day to reach the foot of the city. Even now, he still couldn't fly. If he flew more than 100 meters in the air, he would be pulled back to the ground by a strong gravitational force. Qin Chuan slowly walked forward and looked at the huge stone door that was about 100 meters tall. He looked at the various relief carvings on the stone door. There were real dragons, phoenixes, vermilion birds, black tortoises, and so on. Looking at these relief carvings, a name involuntarily appeared in Qin Chuan's mind. The door of 10,000 demons. If he pushed open this door, he would enter the country of 10,000 demons. Qin Chuan took a deep breath and slowly walked to the door of 10,000 demons. He extended his hand and tried to push the door. Accompanied by a loud roar, the door of 10,000 demons only moved slightly. It wasn't pushed open. Seeing this, Qin Chuan frowned slightly. If he couldn't push open the door of 10,000 demons, how was he going to enter the city? Qin Chuan looked at the surroundings of the door of 10,000 demons again. He wanted to see if there were any mechanisms. Soon, he found some ancient words on a wall. Blood of all demons. Open the demon gate. Seeing these words, Qin Chuan's heart skipped a beat. He raised his hand and pricked the tip of his finger, forcing a drop of blood to shoot at the door of 10,000 demons. When the drop of blood landed on the door of 10,000 demons, the relief carvings on the door of 10,000 demons suddenly came to life. They all became lively and let out various high-pitched noises as if they were welcoming Qin Chuan's arrival. Chapter 1147. Qin Chuan looked at the reliefs that had come alive from the gate of 10,000 demons in astonishment. These reliefs surrounded him affectionately, either welcoming him or surrendering to him. Following a series of cracking sounds, the gate of 10,000 demons that had been sealed for countless years finally opened once again. Rumble! When the gate was completely opened, Qin Chuan subconsciously looked toward the city. He saw the wide and neat bluestone streets, the stone towers on both sides, and the tall and majestic palace in the distance. He subconsciously walked toward the city. After Qin Chuan entered the city, the gate of 10,000 demons slowly closed. At this moment, more than one person on the mountain range in the distance saw the gate of 10,000 demons open and close. Everyone had realized that someone had already entered this magnificent city ahead of them. In the Protoss's camp, Lucas looked at the city in front of him with a sharp gaze and asked the people around him, "Have you found the spy?" "High Priest, we have lost contact with the spy. We suspect that the spy has been discovered by Qin Chuan and has been killed by Qin Chuan." After hearing his subordinate's report, Lucas snorted and said, "We can't find Qin Chuan, we didn't get the benefits of the black armored ants, and now, even that city has been taken by someone else. What a bunch of trash." After hearing Lucas's words, everyone lowered their heads in shame, not daring to meet his gaze. After seeing his subordinate's reactions, Lucas snorted again and said in a deep voice, "Pass down my order. Everyone is to advance at full speed. We must enter that city before the Tian people." Qin Chuan walked slowly on the bluestone street. His gaze was casual and curious as he looked at the buildings on both sides of the street. These buildings weren't considered exquisite, but they had a rough and wild beauty. They were very much in line with the aesthetics of the demon race. Only the demon race's skilled craftsmen could build such buildings. At this moment, Qin Chuan seemed to see countless squirrels roaming around these buildings. They were constantly busy, either moving stones or repairing the eaves and roofs. They were chirping and chattering, and it was very lively. In the next moment, the lively scene disappeared from Qin Chuan's eyes. The street returned to its previous silence. Only the plum blossom-shaped paw prints left on the walls told Qin Chuan that everything he saw just now wasn't an illusion, but something that had happened in the past. The city was very big. Qin Chuan took half a day to walk a short distance. At this time, a loud boom came from the city gate. It seemed that someone was attacking the gate with brute force. After hearing the commotion behind him, Qin Chuan realized that someone else had already arrived in front of the gate of 10,000 demons and was trying to find a way to open it. I can't continue to wander around like this. I need to speed up. At this thought, Qin Chuan couldn't help but quicken his pace. He quickly walked toward the palace in the center of the city. While Qin Chuan was walking toward the palace, thousands of people had already gathered in front of the gate of 10,000 demons. Most of them were Tian people and Protoss people. Only a small portion of them were independent cultivators. At this moment, the Tian people and Protoss's body integration stage overlords were attacking the gate of 10,000 demons together. However, the gate of 10,000 demons was impregnable against the attacks of the body integration stage overlords. It didn't look like it was going to be destroyed at all. Thelon looked at the sturdy gate of 10,000 demons and frowned. This stone gate is a little too sturdy. Even 10 body integration stage overlords together can't break it. When Lucas heard Thelon's words, he calmly said, "This stone gate isn't an ordinary stone gate. It's the gate of 10,000 demons that was refined from the blood essence of 10,000 demons. Under normal circumstances, only the power of a demon's bloodline can open this gate. It's too difficult for us to use brute force to break open this gate of 10,000 demons." After hearing Lucas's words, Thelon asked, "Are you saying that the person who entered this gate earlier was a demon?" Lucas shook his head and said, "Not necessarily. Perhaps that person accidentally obtained a demon's bloodline, or he could be a half-demon." Speaking up to this point, Lucas paused for a moment before continuing. "Previously, when we were crossing this mountain range, I was curious as to why there wasn't a single living thing in this mountain range. Now, it seems that this mountain range was originally inhabited by the descendants of the demon clan. In order to prevent us from capturing these descendants of the demon clan and using their bloodline to open the door of infinite demons, a great demon kept all of them in this city. But when the gate of 10,000 demons opened earlier, we didn't see any large groups of descendants of the demon race entering." Thelon frowned and said, "Could it be that someone captured the descendants of the demon race who didn't manage to enter the city in time?" Lucas nodded and said, "I thought so too. The possibility of this happening is very high." Thelon glanced at the tightly shut gate of 10,000 demons, then looked at the words carved on the stone wall. He couldn't help but think of Qin Chuan. Ever since he entered the ruins, he had been paying attention to Qin Chuan's whereabouts, but he hadn't been able to see Qin Chuan. He felt that if there was anyone among the rogue cultivators who was most likely to enter this city first, it would definitely be Qin Chuan. Thinking of this, Thelon was suddenly curious. If the person who entered the city was really Qin Chuan, then what would Qin Chuan be doing now? Just as Thelon was thinking about Qin Chuan had already reached the foot of the palace. The majestic palace rose from the ground and reached the clouds. Qin Chuan stood at the bottom of the stairs and looked at it for a moment before walking up. The stairs weren't very long. Qin Chuan counted silently. There were a total of 9,999 steps. When Qin Chuan stepped onto the platform in front of the palace, He was surprised to see a white-haired elder standing there and looking at him kindly. "You're here." The elder smiled at Qin Chuan and appeared very gentle. Qin Chuan looked at the elder in surprise and said, "You know me? You've been waiting for me?" The elder shook his head and said to Qin Chuan, "I don't know you, but I've been waiting for someone. Since you're here, then the person I've been waiting for should be you." The elder's words made Qin Chuan feel a little confused. He looked at the elder in confusion and asked, "What kind of person are you waiting for? Or rather, what kind of person am I in your eyes?" The elder looked at Qin Chuan deeply and said, "Someone who can make the sect of 10,000 demons welcome him with respect must be a future king." Qin Chuan looked at the elder deeply and asked, "King? I'm only at the peak of the insightful emptiness realm. I'm still very far from what you think of as a king." "That's why I said you're a future king." The elder looked at Qin Chuan and said, "You have the bloodline of the true dragon. You'll definitely become a king in the future." Hearing the elder's words, Qin Chuan frowned slightly and said, "You can tell." Chapter 1148. In response to Qin Chuan's question, the old man shook his head and answered, "It's not me, but the gate of myriad demons." Qin Chuan subconsciously turned to look at the city gate and said to the old man, "This gate is really called the gate of myriad demons." The old man nodded with a smile and said to Qin Chuan, "It was refined from the bloodline of myriad demons, so it's naturally called the gate of myriad demons. If the gate of myriad demons couldn't even identify the true dragon bloodline, then it wouldn't be worthy of being called the gate of myriad demons." Qin Chuan gently nodded at the old man's words, then asked the old man, "You're a demon too?" The old man nodded and said to Qin Chuan, "I'm called Xian Shi, the commander of Myriad Demon City." Qin Chuan looked at Xian Shi curiously and asked, "Then who's the city lord of Myriad Demon City?" Xian Shi replied, "The city lord's name is Long Bo, but he's been dead for tens of thousands of years. Right now, the only person in Myriad Demon City who's qualified to become the new city lord is you." "Me?" Qin Chuan shook his head and said, "I'm here to search for treasures, not to become the city lord." Qin Chuan wasn't a hot-blooded young man who didn't know anything. Right now there were countless people blocking the gate of myriad demons. They had yet to break through the gate of myriad demons, but that didn't mean that they wouldn't be able to do so in their lifetime. Once the gate of myriad demons was broken through, Myriad Demon City would definitely be attacked. To become the city lord at such a time was simply courting death. Xian Shi wasn't surprised by Qin Chuan's rejection. He stared deeply at Qin Chuan and said, "Are you worried that you'll become the target of everyone when you break through the city?" Qin Chuan nodded honestly and replied, "Although I have the bloodline of the true dragon in my body and have some connection with you, I really can't risk my life because of this. I'm sorry, I really can't do it. There are still many important things waiting for me outside. I can't risk my only life here." Qin Chuan had always believed that the more powerful one was, the more one could do. He was now at the peak of the Dongshu realm, not the peak of the body integration stage. Even if the Tian people didn't interfere, he wouldn't be able to resist the 20-body integration stage overlords of the Protoss. Xian Shi appreciated Qin Chuan's honesty very much. He smiled at Qin Chuan and said, "I think you've misunderstood my intentions. I want you to succeed me as the city lord because I don't want the items in the city to fall into the hands of outsiders. As for the invaders, I'll naturally deal with them." Qin Chuan glanced at Xian Shi and said, "To be honest, I don't feel any powerful aura from you. There are at least 40 body integration stage overlords outside. How are you going to deal with them?" Xian Shi smiled and said to Qin Chuan, "I naturally have a way to deal with them. Before I die, they won't be able to destroy the demon city." Seeing Xian Shi's firm attitude, Qin Chuan asked curiously, "What is it that you want me to take with me?" Xian Shi turned to the side and made an inviting gesture to Qin Chuan, "Please follow me." Rumble. Hearing the loud noise from the city gate, Qin Chuan subconsciously turned his head to look behind him, as if he was worried that the door of myriad demons would be breached. Don't worry. With their strength, they'll need at least 3 days to break through the door of myriad demons, Xianxi said to Qin Chuan. Before that, you don't have to worry about running into them. Qin Chuan nodded and followed Xianxi into the palace. When he saw the countless figures hiding in the palace, Qin Chuan was stunned. There were tens of thousands of demon clan members hiding in the palace. Xianxi sighed when he saw Qin Chuan's shocked expression. He said to Qin Chuan, "They are the descendants of our demon clan. For generations, they've lived in the Great Demon Ridge outside the city. If it weren't for the invaders, they might still be living freely in the Great Demon Ridge. In order to prevent the invaders from using them to open the door of myriad demons, I took them all into the city." Qin Chuan asked curiously, "Apart from you, who else was in the city?" Xianxi shook his head and replied, "Ever since City Lord Longbai passed away, I'm the only one left." Qin Chuan looked at Xianxi and asked, "How did Longbai die?" "No matter who you are, even if you're a supreme existence, you can't escape from old age, sickness, and death." Xianxi sighed and said, "City Lord Longbai passed away after 74,000 years." Hearing Xianxi's sigh, Qin Chuan pursed his lips and asked, "Are you all trapped here?" Xianxi shook his head and replied, "I don't know what happened back then. The expeditionary army left and never returned. However, this is our home. Someone has to stay behind to protect it." Qin Chuan couldn't help but think of the scene he saw in his dream. The expeditionary army was probably the pitiful people who were slaughtered by the human sovereign. With this in mind, Qin Chuan couldn't help but sigh and ask Xianxi, "Do you know about the Void Empire?" Xianxi replied, "Of course I know about the Void Empire. Our demon race and the human race are the vanguard against the Void Empire. We're mortal enemies with the Void Empire." Qin Chuan took a deep look at Xianxi and asked, "What do you think of the human sovereign?" Xianxi pondered for a moment before answering, "You is a good human sovereign. You." Qin Chuan was slightly moved after hearing Xianxi's way of addressing the human sovereign. He asked, "The human sovereign's name is you?" Xianxi nodded and sighed. He told Qin Chuan, "You came from the outside world but you don't know the human sovereign's name. I'm sure the outside world has changed a long time ago." Since a long time ago, Xianxi had already guessed that the outside world was no longer the world he was familiar with. The demon race probably no longer existed. Otherwise, it wouldn't have taken so many years for people to arrive at Myriad Demon City. Qin Chuan looked at Xianxi with a complicated gaze and replied, "The human race and the demon race have now retreated from the stage of history and are hiding in a corner to recuperate. I can be said to be the strongest of the two races. Most of them are only at the nascent soul realm." Xianxi fell silent after hearing Qin Chuan's words. He didn't expect the situation of the human race and the demon race to be worse than he imagined. Not only did they lose their homeland, they didn't even have a single overlord at the body integration realm. Most of them were only at the nascent soul realm. How sad. The once strongest race in the universe has fallen to such a degree. I thought you were the heir of one of the two races. I didn't expect you to be the leader. Xianxi let out a long sigh and said to Qin Chuan, "If that's the case, you have to take that thing away." Qin Chuan asked curiously, "What is this thing you're talking about?" Xianxi gave Qin Chuan a deep look and said, "It's the hope for the human race and the demon race to rise again." Chapter 1149. In the depths of the palace was a dark staircase that led straight to the ground. With a gentle wave of his hand, lamps lit up on both sides of the staircase, illuminating the path ahead. Xianxi walked in front and whispered to Qin Chuan, "City Lord Longbai was originally the second son of the previous City Lord. He was not qualified to inherit the position of City Lord, but in order to protect that thing, City Lord Longbai had no choice but to inherit the position and use his life to protect it." Qin Chuan was puzzled by Xian Shi's words and asked, "Why does Long Bai need to use his life to protect that thing?" "Because only those with the bloodline of the true dragon can gain its recognition." Xian Shi gave Qin Chuan a deep look and said, "Ever since City Lord Long Bai passed away, 3,400 years have passed and no one has been able to activate it. Until today, when I met you, I saw hope again." As they spoke, Xian Shi and Qin Chuan reached the bottom of the staircase. Xian Shi looked at the bronze door in front of them and said to Qin Chuan, "Use your true dragon bloodline to open this door, just like when you open the door of myriad demons. That thing is inside, waiting for your arrival." Qin Chuan gave Xian Shi a subtle glance and said, "I suddenly don't want that thing anymore." Xian Shi frowned at Qin Chuan's words and asked, "Don't you want to lead the monster race and the human race to rise again?" Qin Chuan sighed and said, "Of course I've thought about it, but if I die, I won't be able to continue thinking about it." Xian Shi couldn't help but fall silent at Qin Chuan's words. After a while, he asked Qin Chuan, "How did you know?" Qin Chuan pursed his lips and said to Xian Shi, "Your attitude towards me is too warm. More importantly, the descendants of the demon race in the pantheon of demons were not happy to see me. On the contrary, they revealed some hostility. Although they hid it well, I still noticed it." Originally, Qin Chuan didn't have any suspicions about Xian Shi. However, when he entered the pantheon of demons and saw the descendants of the demon clan, he suddenly realized that he was wrong. When the descendants of the demon clan saw him, they didn't show the enthusiasm of a new city lord, nor did they show the joy of seeing their fellow demon clansmen. Instead, they were cold and hostile. Obviously, they had been informed beforehand and concealed their emotions well. However, Qin Chuan's powerful mental strength still picked up some clues and began to suspect Xian Shi's motives. To be honest, Qin Chuan really didn't want to suspect Xian Shi, but the truth was right in front of him. He couldn't blindly believe Xian Shi just because he was a demon. After hearing Qin Chuan's answer, Xian Shi sighed and said to Qin Chuan, "Since you've seen through it, I'll tell you the truth. You don't have the qualifications to succeed the position of City Lord of Demon City because you're not a pure demon. You're a hybrid between a human and a demon." Qin Chuan nodded and said frankly, "That's true. I was originally a human, but for some reason, a dragon senior changed my blood and gave me the dragon bloodline." Xian Shi looked deeply at Qin Chuan and said, "You're not a pure true dragon, so I naturally have no need to be loyal to you. Therefore, I have no psychological burden to harm you." Qin Chuan smiled and said to Xian Shi, "As long as the one who wants to harm me is you and not Long Bo, then I'm at ease." Xian Shi was a little surprised and asked Qin Chuan, "You don't seem to be afraid at all?" Qin Chuan looked at Xian Shi and asked curiously, "Do you like to say strange things before attacking your enemies?" After hearing Qin Chuan's mocking words, Xian Shi's gaze on Qin Chuan turned sharp. He said to Qin Chuan, "I've been guarding Demon City for tens of thousands of years. I'm nearing the end of my lifespan. If I can't complete the bloodline transformation at this time and turn from a Xian snake to a true dragon, then I'll die for sure. Your arrival has given me hope. As long as I devour the true dragon bloodline in your body, I'll definitely be able to turn into a true dragon." When Qin Chuan saw Xian Shi's evil intentions, he had already guessed that Xian Shi's after the true dragon bloodline in his body. Just like Knight Serenity, Xian Shi saved him for this reason. However, Knight Serenity and Xian Shi were different. Knight Serenity wanted to make a deal with him and had no intention of harming him. Xian Shi, on the other hand, wanted to devour him and make him disappear from this world forever. Qin Chuan sighed and said to Xian Shi, "You're at least at the peak of the unity stage, right? That's why you're not afraid of the true dragon bloodline suppression, right?" Xian Shi sneered at Qin Chuan's words. That's right. Once I devour the true dragon bloodline in your body, I'll definitely be able to break through to the peak of the unity stage. Become one of the rulers of this universe." Qin Chuan nodded. "If your plan succeeds, You might really be able to become one of the rulers of this universe. But do you think I would be talking to you for so long if I didn't have any confidence in defeating you? Xianxi sneered. If you had any tricks up your sleeve, you would have used them long ago. Why would you talk to me for so long? Now that you know the cause and effect, it's time for you to die in peace. Xianxi attacked Qinchuan before he even finished speaking. He raised his hand and reached for Qinchuan's heart, intending to destroy Qinchuan's heart. Qinchuan didn't retreat in the face of Xianxi's attack. Instead, he summoned the dragon orb and shone it on Xianxi. When the light touched Xianxi, Xianxi opened his mouth and let out a miserable shriek. His hand that was reaching for Qinchuan retracted at lightning speed. This is heavenly light. Xianxi couldn't believe it. His voice was filled with fear. He didn't expect Qinchuan to have mastered such a supreme skill. Qinchuan pursed his lips when he saw Xianxi being restrained by heavenly light. That's right, it's heavenly light. I am the new Dragon Lord of Dragon Valley. As a Yao with a thin dragon bloodline, you're most afraid of heavenly light. Unless you're willing to force out the dragon bloodline in your body, you won't be able to resist me. And once you do, you'll probably turn into ashes immediately. Hearing Qinchuan's words, Xianxi's tone was filled with resentment. Since you're the Dragon Lord and have mastered such a supreme skill as heavenly light, why didn't you tell me earlier? Qinchuan sneered. I've been talking so much nonsense with you because I wanted to see if you still had any regrets, but I can see that you've completely betrayed the Yao race. The thin dragon clan bloodline in your body was probably obtained from Long Bow. Xianxi's expression changed drastically. Qinchuan was right, the dragon bloodline in his body did come from Long Bow. Chapter 1150. Seeing the change in expression on Xianxi's face, Qinchuan guessed that Long Bow didn't die of old age. Instead, he was killed by Xianxi. At this moment, Xianxi's heart was filled with regret. When he saw that Qinchuan was only at the peak of Dongshu realm, he thought it was a great opportunity for him. He never imagined that Qinchuan had mastered the 9 transformations of the Dragon Pearl that only the Dragon Lord could cultivate. It was true that this heavenly light could be used to defend against enemies, but it was more useful as a punishment for those who committed serious crimes in the Dragon Clan. As long as one had the bloodline of the Dragon Clan, no matter how high one's cultivation was, they would be bound by the heavenly light. Otherwise, the Dragon Lord wouldn't be able to control the Dragon Clan. Unfortunately, it was too late for Xianxi to regret. He couldn't ask for anything else. He only hoped that Qinchuan would spare his life for the time being, because he was still useful to him. Qinchuan glanced at Xianxi, then shifted his gaze to the bronze door in front of him. He asked Xianxi, "What's behind this door?" Xianxi replied in a low voice, "It's the corpse of Governor Long Bow and the 10,000 Demons seal." Although Xianxi had lied to Qinchuan in many aspects, there was one thing he didn't lie to Qinchuan. Long Bow had indeed sacrificed his life to protect the 10,000 Demons seal. However, what Long Bow faced at that time wasn't the erosion of time, but Xianxi's attack. "Open it!" Qinchuan ordered Xianxi. Xianxi was currently bound by the heavenly light and could only obey Qinchuan's command. He used his thin bloodline of the Dragon Clan to open the bronze door. Following the opening of the bronze door, a huge underground palace appeared in front of Qinchuan. In the middle of the palace was a high platform. On top of the platform, the silhouette of an azure dragon was hovering. The dragon's aura was dense and shocking. Qinchuan didn't need Xianxi to tell him that the azure dragon must be Long Bow. From the looks of it, Long Bow's appearance was actually somewhat similar to Tsang Hao's. Xianxi stood behind Qinchuan and whispered to Qinchuan. Back then, City Lord Long Bai was nearing the end of his life and had no children. I wanted to inherit the City Lord's position as a matter of course. However, City Lord Long Bai had no intention of giving me the 10,000 Demon seal. In a fit of anger, I attacked City Lord Long Bai and killed him." Upon hearing Xian Shi's words, Qin Chuan sneered and said, "You're pretty honest now." Xian Shi sighed helplessly. "Winner takes all. I've already lost, so there's no need for me to hide anything." Qin Chuan no longer paid any attention to Xian's snake. Instead, he turned his attention to the light green square seal placed in front of Long Bo. It looked somewhat similar to the cyclic sky seal he had obtained before. Xian Shi noticed Qin Chuan's gaze and said to Qin Chuan, "That's the 10,000 demon seal. It's also the symbol of the City Lord of Myriad Demon City. It's a supreme saint artifact." Qin Chuan turned to Xian Shi and asked, "It's been so many years. You still can't take the 10,000 demon seal?" As he spoke, Qin Chuan sent a strand of mental energy to Xian Shi and said, "Sign this contract and then talk to me." Although Xian Shi was already under Qin Chuan's control, Qin Chuan still decided to make Xian Shi sign a slave contract to prevent him from deceiving him. Looking at the slave contract floating before him, Dusk Snake fell silent for a moment. In the end, he did not have the courage to refuse. He resigned himself to his fate and signed the slave contract with Qin Chuan, becoming yet another slave by Qin Chuan's side. After signing the contract, Xian Shi said to Qin Chuan, "There are two ways to take the 10,000 demon seal. The first way is for the City Lord to teach it to me personally. Back in the day, I hoped that City Lord Long Bo would teach me the 10,000 demon seal through this method, but he didn't. The second way is to have a God Spirit bloodline. There are only two types of God Spirit bloodline in the Yao clan. They are the true dragon bloodline and the phoenix bloodline." Qin Chuan heard this and asked, "So, I can take the 10,000 demon seal?" Xian Shi nodded and answered, "Master, you can take the 10,000 demon seal. I've been trying to consume the true dragon bloodline in City Lord Long Bo in order to take the 10,000 demon seal. Later, when Master arrived, I wanted to borrow Master's hand to take the 10,000 demon seal and force Master to teach it to me." Qin Chuan nodded and asked Xian Shi, "Are there any other traps here?" Xian Shi shook his head and answered, "There are no traps here. Master, you can do whatever you want." Qin Chuan glanced at Xian Shi and said, "Go guard the door." Xian Shi accepted the order and left. Qin Chuan walked step by step towards the high platform and stopped in front of Long Bo. Looking at Long Bo's corpse that had been dead for thousands of years, he let out a long sigh and said, "If Xian Shi hadn't harmed you, perhaps we would have had a chance to meet again." Qin Chuan looked at Long Bo with a complicated gaze and said, "Xian Shi harmed you. I should have executed him immediately, but I still have many enemies outside the city. I need Xian Shi's power to deal with them. Once I've eliminated those enemies, I guarantee that I'll personally send Xian Shi to the 9 underworlds so that you can personally punish him." Qin Chuan had never thought of sparing Xian Shi's life from the very beginning. Although Xian Shi was at the peak of the unity stage and would be a great help, Qin Chuan couldn't accept the fact that Xian Shi had devoured Long Bo. Therefore, he chose to execute Xian Shi after using him. He didn't have any psychological burden in doing so. After speaking to Long Bo's corpse, Qin Chuan reached out to grab the 10,000 demon seal. When he touched it, a hazy silhouette suddenly appeared on the 10,000 demon seal. It looked very similar to Long Bo. The silhouette didn't speak. It just quietly glanced at Qin Chuan before dissipating into a beam of light and shooting into Qin Chuan's forehead. Buzz! The 10,000 demon seal trembled slightly. It hummed in Qin Chuan's hand as if it was alive, as if it was trying to say something. The 10,000 demon seal and the cyclic sky seal are both supreme quality saint artifact. I wonder if there's a connection between them. Qin Chuan bowed deeply to Long Bo's corpse after some thought. He said, "Senior, please forgive my rudeness. I wish to take your corpse away. I hope that I can bury you in Dragon's Valley one day." With that, Qin Chuan waved his hand at Long Bo's corpse and put it into his storage ring. He then turned around and walked outside. He asked Xian Shi, who was guarding the door, "What's the situation outside?" Xian Shi replied, "The foreign races outside are still attacking the Gate of Myriad Demons. They're stronger than I expected. The Gate of Myriad Demons can last for another day at most." Qin Chuan stared deeply at Xian Shi and asked, "Are you confident in defeating those people outside?" Xian Shi had already guessed Qin Chuan's intentions. He let out a long sigh and said to Qin Chuan, "This old servant is willing to go through fire and water for Master and the Myriad Demon City. Take it as making up for the sins I've committed over the years." Chapter 1151. More and more people had gathered outside the door of 10,000 demons. There were more than 30,000 of them. Other than the Protoss and the Tian people, there were also some other forces. Most of them were rogue cultivators with no background. Wu Heng and the rest were also outside the door of 10,000 demons and were watching from afar. Where do you think LV Chuan went? Mei looked at the rogue cultivators around her and whispered to the people around her, "I heard that the door of 10,000 demons opened once before and someone entered the demon city. Could that person be LV Chuan?" Wu Heng shook his head and said, "LV Chuan is powerful, but the door of 10,000 demons isn't something that anyone can open easily. Look, so many overlords in the form synthesis stage couldn't break the door of 10,000 demons even after joining forces. LV Chuan can't be stronger than these overlords, right?" Xie thought for a while and said, "When I was asking around, I found out that anyone with a demon bloodline can open the door of 10,000 demons. Could LV Chuan have met a demon descendant who was alone in the forest and used the descendant's bloodline to open the door of 10,000 demons? Don't make wild guesses." Nyoba snorted and said, "It doesn't matter whether LV Chuan has entered the door of 10,000 demons or not. It's best that he hasn't been discovered." Everyone nodded in agreement when they heard Nyoba's words. From what they knew, Qin Chuan should be hiding from the Protoss and not continue to explore and search for treasures. After all, his life was the most important. Everything else was just a mere worldly possession. Mei looked at the 20 overlords in the form synthesis stage, who were attacking the door of 10,000 demons, and asked everyone, "How long do you think it will take for them to break the door of 10,000 demons?" Wu Hui pondered for a moment before replying, "They have already been attacking continuously for more than half a day. No matter how strong the defense of the Gate of 10,000 demons is, it should have reached its limit. I guess that they will definitely be able to break through the Gate of 10,000 demons in half a day." Nyoba nodded and said, "I think so too. They still need half a day." Xie was just about to join in the discussion when he suddenly exclaimed with surprise, and he said to everyone, "Look quickly! There's someone on the city wall." When the crowd heard Xie's words, they instinctively lifted their heads and looked at the city walls of the demon city. When they saw the two figures standing on the city walls, a look of shock appeared on their faces as they cried out in alarm. There really is someone. One after another, many people discovered the existence of the two figures on the city wall. After the news spread, the Protoss and the Tian people immediately stopped their attack and turned all their attention to the two people standing on the city wall. Thelon looked at the two figures standing on the city wall. Their auras were completely covered by the black cloak. He frowned and asked the people around him, "Go and find out who they are. Are they people who entered the demon city a long time ago, or are they natives of the city?" This was a very crucial question that had to be answered. Qin Chuan looked at the countless figures outside the city gate. His eyes accurately locked onto the Protoss at the front. He said to Dusk Snake, "Do you see those Protoss guys?" When Dusk Snake heard Qin Chuan's words, he subconsciously looked at the group of Protoss in white robes. He said to Qin Chuan, "I see them. Are they Master's enemies?" Qin Chuan nodded and said to Dusk Snake, "That's right. They are my enemies. They have 20 Unity Stage overlords. Do you have a way to deal with them? Dusk Snake glanced at the 20 Unity Stage overlords among the Protoss and replied, There are only 4 late Unity Stage overlords. There's nothing to be afraid of. Although the Protoss had 20 Unity Stage overlords, the strongest among them was only at the late Unity Stage. Dusk Snake, on the other hand, was at the peak of the Unity Stage. It might take some effort for Dusk Snake to kill them, but it definitely wouldn't be difficult. Of course, the Protoss weren't pushovers either. They might have some hidden trump cards. Therefore, Dusk Snake wasn't completely confident that he could kill all of the Protoss. Qinchuan smiled and said to Dusk Snake, Then get ready. Only kill the Protoss. Who are you people? Lucas's voice suddenly came from below the city. Lucas's face was expressionless as he looked at Qinchuan and Dusk Snake with a dignified gaze. Qinchuan smiled at Lucas's shout. He said to Dusk Snake, No need to waste words with them. Let's just do it. Upon hearing Qinchuan's order, Dusk Snake's figure flickered and he appeared in front of Lucas. He raised his hand and punched out. A terrifying force instantly surged toward Lucas. Lucas's expression changed when he saw Dusk Snake's sudden attack. He let out a low growl and placed a mirror in front of him. Under Dusk Snake's attack, the mirror only lasted for a moment before it shattered. The powerful force of the attack didn't diminish in the slightest as it slammed into Lucas's chest. This attack should have been fatal, but after the mirror absorbed part of the force, it only managed to injure Lucas. Even so, it was enough to shock everyone present. No one had expected Dusk Snake to suddenly launch an attack. What was even more surprising was that Lucas had been heavily injured in the first exchange. He had even lost a lower-grade sacred artifact in the process. If it weren't for the low-grade sacred artifact, Lucas would have died by now. A peak Unity Stage Overlord. Only a peak Unity Stage Overlord would have the strength to injure Lucas in one blow. While everyone was thinking about this, Dusk Snake had already launched his second attack on Lucas. However, this time, the Protoss had already reacted. Maggie, Dolan, and Na Ming, the 3 High Priestesses, attacked Dusk Snake at the same time. Dusk Snake sneered. He waved his hand and neutralized Maggie and the other 2's attack. At the same time, Lucas took the opportunity to retreat and widen the distance between him and Dusk Snake. Who are you? Lucas glared at Dusk Snake furiously. He wanted to know Dusk Snake's identity. He wanted to know who was so bold as to try to kill him. Dusk Snake couldn't be bothered to answer Lucas's question. He knew that it was better to cut off one finger than to injure all 10. He ignored Maggie, Dolan, and Na Ming's attacks and focused solely on killing Lucas. This made Lucas extremely sullen. He had no choice but to turn around and flee. Not far away, Thelon frowned when he saw this scene. He was hesitant about joining in the battle. Without knowing Dusk Snake's identity, if they just watched Dusk Snake attack the Protoss and didn't lend a hand, they would be in a very bad situation if Dusk Snake turned around and attacked them after eliminating the Protoss. Thelon slowly raised his head and looked at Qinchuan, who was standing on top of the city wall. Suddenly, a crazy idea popped into his mind. Chapter 1152. Thelon, what are you waiting for? Lucas, who was being chased by Dusk Snake, roared angrily at Tai Long, hoping that the Celestials would join the battle and relieve their pressure. Although they had 20 body integration stage overlords, they still weren't strong enough to face an overlord at the peak of the body integration stage like Xian Shi. The Tian people all looked at Thelon when they heard Lucas' word. As long as Thelon gave the order, they would immediately reinforce the Protoss. Everyone could see that once the Protoss were eliminated, it would be the Tian people's turn. Just when everyone thought that Thelon would give the order to reinforce the Protoss, Thelon said to them, Everyone, listen up. Keep an eye on the other person standing on the wall. If he doesn't join the battle, we won't attack. When the Sky Clan members heard Tai Long's words, they were slightly taken aback. after which, they subconsciously turned their gazes towards Qin Chuan, who was standing on the city wall. Everyone seemed to have thought of something as their expressions turned extremely grave. After giving the order, Thelon turned to Lucas and said, "High Priest Lucas, the enemy isn't alone. He has a helper watching from the sidelines. We Tion people will help you keep an eye on this helper. You just need to surround and annihilate him with all your might." Lucas almost went crazy when he heard Thelon's words. The Tion people clearly didn't want to help them. However, the Tion people's reason was too reasonable. They couldn't find a way to refute it. Just as Lucas was about to say something, a gray demon energy suddenly appeared beside him. It wrapped around his arm and tore it off. "You're still in the mood to chat with others when you're fighting me? You're looking down on me." She glowered at Lucas. He raised his hand and crushed Lucas' arm into ashes. Lucas, who had lost an arm, was terrified. He shouted at the Protoss's camp, "Everyone, attack! Form a formation! Kill him!" Upon hearing Lucas's command, the divines, who had long been prepared, immediately attacked. They formed a large formation and charged towards Dusk Snake. However, Dusk Snake only sneered at the formation that was strong enough to kill the black ants. He opened his mouth and spat out a cloud of gray mist that enveloped the divines. The stench made them dizzy and disoriented. Every one of them foamed at the mouth. The formation they had just formed collapsed in an instant. Lucas couldn't help but despair. Once she spat out the poisonous mist, less than 10% of the Protoss would survive. Lucas knew that he would die if he continued to delay. He glared fiercely at Shi and roared, "God!" Hearing Lucas's roar, Maggie, Dolan, and Na Ming immediately stopped their pursuit. They opened their mouths and spat out a mouthful of blood essence towards Lucas. At the same time, they formed hand seals and said in unison, "The only true God Ares, your people pray for your arrival." As Maggie and the other two prayed, the 3 balls of essence blood cleverly bypassed Dusk Snake and fell into Lucas's hands, merging into his body. Dusk Snake's expression couldn't help but turn grim when he saw this. He knew very well that Lucas, who had been forced into a corner by him, was about to unleash his ultimate move. She wanted to kill Lucas before Maggie and the other two finished their ritual. However, the other Protoss's body integration stage overlords attacked she like they didn't care about their own lives. Although their attacks didn't do much damage to she, they successfully stopped she from killing Lucas first. Bang! By the time Dusk Snake tore the 7th body integration stage overlord to shreds, Lucas and the others had finally completed the ritual of summoning the god. Lucas, who had lost an arm, no longer had any fear, despair, or anger on his face. Instead, it was replaced by a solemn and compassionate look. God says, "Those who attempt to assassinate God's emissary will be punished by the heavens." Lucas' solemn voice came out of his mouth. The clear sky instantly turned dark and gloomy. The roar of thunder shook the heavens and earth. Shi's expression changed drastically. With his current cultivation, he would suffer a great loss if he were to endure the lightning tribulation. While she was furious, Qin Chuan suddenly made his move. He directed the lightning tribulation's power from the dark clouds towards himself. She was shocked when he saw this, and the others were stunned by Qin Chuan's move as well. Focus on killing the enemy. Qin Chuan glanced at she indifferently. If the Protoss had used other methods to deal with she, he might not have been able to help. However, he was a professional when it came to overcoming lightning tribulations. With Qin Chuan stopping the lightning tribulation, she immediately charged at Lucas. Lucas glared at Qin Chuan, who was standing on the city wall. He roared, "It's you!" By now, Lucas had recognized Qin Chuan's identity from the way Qin Chuan dealt with the lightning tribulation. However, she didn't give Lucas the chance to continue. He was already in front of Lucas. He raised his hand and grabbed at Lucas' throat. He wanted to crush his throat. God says you should be 10,000 miles away. At this critical moment, Lucas once again used his power of belief. He wanted to send Xianxi 10,000 miles away. However, Qin Chuan made his move again. With the power of the void piercing, he shattered the spatial passage Lucas opened with his power of belief. I don't like to hear your God talking all the time. Qin Chuan looked at Lucas indifferently. I once said that I would kill all of you. I will do it. As he spoke, Qin Chuan took off his hood and revealed his face to everyone. Since Lucas had already seen through his identity, there was no need for him to continue hiding. When Qin Chuan revealed his face, Thelon couldn't help but take a deep breath. He had guessed that the black-robed man was Qin Chuan, but when he saw it for himself, he couldn't help but be shocked. He really wanted to know what Qin Chuan was doing in Shifu City. How did he manage to find such a powerful helper at the peak of Unity stage? When the survivors of the Protoss faction saw Qin Chuan's face, they were all shocked. They didn't expect the person who forced them into a corner to be Qin Chuan, the person they had been searching for all this time. Qin Chuan! Lucas roared at Qin Chuan. God says you will die. Just as the powerful power of vow was about to take effect, Dusk Snake had already grabbed Lucas by the throat. With a low growl, Dusk Snake crushed Lucas' throat under Lucas' venomous gaze, turning his bones into ash and his divine soul to dust. Chapter 1153. After Lucas' death, Maggie, Dolan, and Na Ming, who were mentally connected to Lucas, were severely injured. Their auras instantly withered. The three of them looked at Dusk Snake in horror, then tried to escape. Unfortunately, Qin Chuan did not want to give them the chance to do so. Realm of Wood. Qin Chuan used the Realm of Wood to block Maggie and the others. Although it was almost useless, it was enough for Dusk Snake to react and kill another one. Let me go, Qin Chuan. Maggie was terrified by Dusk Snake's attack. She loudly begged Qin Chuan for mercy. Even the lofty overlord of the form synthesis stage, the high priestess of the Protoss, could not remain calm in the face of the threat of death. Qin Chuan looked at Maggie coldly. He had no intention of showing her any mercy. Since he had said that he would kill all the Protoss here, he would not go back on his words. Maggie saw that Qin Chuan had no intention of stopping Dusk Snake. Her face turned vicious and she tried to self-destruct. However, Dusk Snake did not give her the chance. He pierced her body with absolute strength and scattered the energy she had gathered in her body. After Lucas, the second High Priestess of the Protoss had fallen. Seeing Maggie die, Dolan roared at Qin Chuan. Qin Chuan, do you really want to make an enemy of the Protoss? If you kill us, even the Tian people won't be able to protect you. Qin Chuan glanced at Dolan and said, I don't need anyone to protect me. I will protect myself. As he spoke, Qin Chuan gathered more towering trees around Dolan and continued to surround him. As for Na Ming, he would leave it to Dusk Snake to deal with. Qin Chuan, you will die a horrible death. The One God sect will not let you off. Amidst the roars of despair, Duolan and Na Ming died one after another at Dusk Snake's hands. At this point, the 4 high priests dispatched by the Protoss were all dead. The remaining body integration stage overlords were no longer a threat. They were all killed by Dusk Snake in a matter of moments. At this moment, over 30,000 people were looking at Qin Chuan with extremely complicated gazes. Their gazes were a mixture of shock, fear, and madness. Everyone was shocked by Qin Chuan's earth-shattering move. 300 Protoss oracles, 20 body synthesis stage overlords, and 4 late-stage body synthesis stage high priests were killed in less than 10 minutes. Their blood was spilled in front of the demon city, and their souls were destroyed. They were even deprived of the right to descend to the netherworld. If they hadn't seen it with their own eyes, they would never have believed that such a crazy thing could happen in this world. Once this matter spread to the outside world, it would definitely set off huge waves. And Qin Chuan's name was like a curse, deeply imprinted in everyone's heart. In the forest, Ame stared at Qinchuan, who was standing on top of the city wall with her mouth agape. She felt that her brain wasn't working properly. Previously, they were worried that Qinchuan wouldn't be able to escape the Protoss's pursuit. But now, all 300 Protoss were killed by Qinchuan. Although Dusk Snake was the one who killed them, everyone could see that Dusk Snake was under Qinchuan's command. This was no different from Qinchuan killing them himself. Lu Chuan. No, he's Qinchuan. Nyoba looked at Qinchuan in shock. He said to everyone, "He's Lu Chuan, he's Qinchuan." Nyoba's words were incoherent, but everyone understood what Nyoba meant. They could understand Nyoba. After all, no matter who it was, they would be shocked to the point of being incoherent. Wu Heng took a deep breath and said to everyone, "He's indeed Lu Chuan, but his name should be Qinchuan. He's too strong." Xie exclaimed, "That's the Protoss." Hearing Xie's exclamation, everyone felt that everything had happened too suddenly and too inconceivably. The powerful Protoss divine envoys, a total of 20 overlords in the form synthesis stage, was enough to wipe out any faction other than the primordial tribes. But such a force was so easily wiped out by Qinchuan. Wu Heng looked deeply at everyone and said, "From now on, we don't know him. We have nothing to do with him." Everyone frowned when they heard Wu Heng's words. They wanted to refute, but they couldn't because they knew that Qinchuan was in big trouble this time. The Protoss wouldn't let Qinchuan go. Even those who were related to Qinchuan wouldn't be spared. Ame sighed and said bitterly, "We don't deserve to be his friends. Everything he does is earth-shattering, and we only have the right to watch from afar. The gap between us is just too big." Mei's words echoed everyone's thoughts. The gap between them and Qinchuan was too big. It wasn't as simple as the gap between their realms. When they saw that Qinchuan and Xian had no intention of continuing the fight, the various factions and itinerant cultivators breathed a sigh of relief. Qinchuan didn't want to cause trouble for the Tian people, so he didn't talk to Thelon. He only glanced at Thelon before he and Xian returned to the Demon City. After Qinchuan and Xian left, the quiet Demon City became noisy. Everyone was excitedly discussing the battle that had just taken place. Some of them had lived for thousands of years, but this was the first time they had seen 20 overlords of the body integration stage fall at the same time. It was too shocking. However, most of them felt sorry for Qinchuan. Although Qinchuan had been very awe-inspiring and domineering just now, everyone knew that the Protoss wouldn't let Qinchuan off the hook once they left the ancient ruins. When the time came, a mere Xian wouldn't be able to withstand the wrath of the Protoss. Qinchuan's death was certain. However, some people didn't think so. For example, Thelon. Based on his understanding of Qinchuan, if the Protoss didn't send someone who could instantly kill Qinchuan, then Qinchuan would definitely have a way to withstand the wrath of the Protoss. This guy, no matter where he goes, he's always a famous person. Thelon couldn't help but sigh. When he first heard of Qinchuan, it was when Qinchuan had single-handedly killed 2/3 stage experts from the Void Empire. Later, when he met Qinchuan again, it was because of the exchange meeting. It was suspected that the only true god, Atheus, was the incarnation of Qinchuan in the human world. When the Protoss declared that they would capture Qinchuan alive in the ancient ruins, Thelon was worried for Qinchuan. However, judging from the current situation, his worries were completely meaningless. The Protoss' revenge couldn't withstand a single blow from Qinchuan's thunderous means. At this moment, Thelon couldn't wait to see how Qinchuan would deal with the Protoss after leaving the ancient ruins. Chapter 1154. Deus Cluster, One God Religion. As the Pope of the One God religion, Saint Baudelot's favorite thing to do every day was to pray in the church, greeting the one true God, Atheus, on behalf of God's people. Whenever Saint Baudelaire began to pray, no one was allowed to disturb him, because in Saint Baudelaire's view, that would be a great disrespect to the one true God. On this day, Saint Baudelaire was praying in the church hall as usual. However, halfway through the prayer, Cardinal Sam, who had been guarding outside the door, walked in. Saint Baudelaire couldn't help but frown when he heard the footsteps behind him. However, he didn't stop praying. Instead, he hoped that the person who disturbed him would consciously leave. However, Sam had no intention of leaving at all. He slowly came to Saint Baudelaire's side and whispered, "Your Holiness, something has happened." Saint Baudelaire had no choice but to stop praying when he heard Sam's words. He turned his head to look at Sam and said in a flat tone, "If it isn't something serious, you will be stripped of your identity as cardinal and demoted to a priest." Sam pursed his lips and said to Saint Baudelaire, "Just now, the shrine's God's servants sent a message. The spirit tablets of the 300 divine envoys, who went to the 36th ancient demon race ruins, have all been shattered." Saint Baudelaire's expression instantly turned serious when he heard this. He said in a deep voice, "Are you sure?" Sam nodded and said to Saint Baudelaire, "I just went to see for myself. The spirit tablets of the 300 divine envoys have indeed been shattered." After getting a definite answer, Saint Baudelaire slowly stood up and said in an awe-inspiring tone, "A total of 20 overlords of the form synthesis stage, and 4 of them are high priests. With such a force, even if they were in danger, it's impossible for them to be wiped out. There must be a problem." Sam nodded and said to Saint Baudelaire, "I think so too. But they ran into a problem in the 36th ancient monster clan ruins. We don't know what happened to them at all." "Then send someone to investigate," Saint Baudelaire said coldly. "You will personally lead a team to Pegasus." Qin Chuan and Dusk Snake retreated to Shifter City after wiping out the 300 divine envoys of the Protoss. Qin Chuan looked at Dusk Snake and asked, "What else is in this ruin besides Shifter City?" Black Snake replied, "These ruins were originally the territory of the Demon City. There are no other buildings except for the Demon City. However, there is a breeding ground for ancient fierce beasts in the east of the Demon City. If Master likes it, he can capture a cub and raise it. It can be used as a mount or a fighting beast." Qin Chuan curiously asked, "What kind of ferocious beast?" "A lot. If Master wants to capture a cub, you can go and take a look yourself. With the 10,000 beast seal, there won't be any danger." When he obtained the 10,000 beast seal, Qin Chuan knew that the 10,000 beast seal had the ability to command 10,000 beasts. Ancient vicious beasts might be deadly in the eyes of others, but in front of Qin Chuan, who wielded the 10,000 beast seal, they were as obedient as pets, allowing Qin Chuan to do whatever he wanted. Qin Chuan looked at Dusk Snake and said, "Let's not worry about other things for now. Let's talk about how we should deal with you first." Dusk Snake wasn't surprised to hear Qin Chuan's words. He whispered to Qin Chuan, "I'm at your disposal, Master." Qin Chuan sighed. To be honest, Dusk Snake was a peak body integration stage expert. However, Dusk Snake had betrayed Long Bow and tried to deceive and harm him. Therefore, Qin Chuan didn't want to keep Dusk Snake by his side. Although Dusk Snake had signed a slave contract with him, Qin Chuan still felt a little uncomfortable. "I originally wanted to kill you and have you go down to the 9 underworlds to see Long Bow so that he can punish you personally." Qin Chuan looked at Dusk Snake with a complicated gaze. "However, after the battle just now, I have some other ideas." Dusk Snake knew that Qin Chuan didn't want to kill him immediately. He heaved a sigh of relief. At the same time, his attitude towards Qin Chuan became even more respectful. He whispered, "I'm at your command, Master." Qin Chuan looked deeply at Dusk Snake and said, "We've already signed a slave contract. I can sense that you have less than 1,000 years of life left. Follow me for now. Once we leave these ancient ruins, I'll arrange for you to do something somewhere. After that, I'll bury Long Bow and you'll go guard the mausoleum to atone for your crimes." Dusk Snake couldn't help but cry when he heard Chinchuan's arrangement. He whispered, "Thank you, Master, for giving me a chance to turn over a new leaf." Chinchuan shook his head. "To be honest, I'm only using your powerful fighting strength. I've already broken my promise to Long Bow by not killing you immediately. However, I believe that Long Bow will forgive me if he knows what I want you to do." Chinchuan's arrangement for Dusk Snake was very simple. He would go to the Sinai Galaxy with Bai Yu and search for the Land of Exile. Dusk Snake would guard the Land of Exile. Once he reached the body integration stage, he would bring all the humans and demons in the Land of Exile to Troy City and rebuild the city. At that time, he would bury Long Bow in Dragon's Valley and have Dusk Snake guard the mausoleum for Long Bow. Chinchuan made this arrangement because he was worried about his body. There was only a little over a year left before the Void Lotus flared up. If he couldn't reach the body integration stage within a year, he would be in danger of being corroded by the Void Force. Once he was corroded by the Void Force, the plan for the humans and demons to return to the universe would be affected. Before Lu Zi matured, Dusk Snake would be the guardian of the Land of Exile. He would protect the Land of Exile in Chinchuan's place. By the time Dusk Snake reached the end of his lifespan, Lu Zi would have matured. This way, the hope for the humans and demons to return to the universe would continue. Chinchuan didn't think about this before because he was extremely angry at Dusk Snake's actions and made this decision on impulse. Now that he had calmed down, the things he needed to consider were more complicated. Chinchuan believed that if Long Bow's spirit was in heaven, he would definitely agree with his arrangement. There were countless treasures in the huge demon city, but they had all been taken away by Dusk Snake a long time ago. Now, all of them had fallen into Chinchuan's hands. Chinchuan wasn't interested in these treasures, but they would definitely play a role in rebuilding Troy City in the future. Due to the fact that Chinchuan and the mysterious snake had killed the 300 divine envoys of the God Clan, the Gate of Myriad Demons was now completely quiet. No one had the guts to attack the Myriad Demons city anymore. Everyone had chosen to explore in other directions in search of treasures. It was also because of this that Chinchuan and the mysterious snake could leave the Myriad Demons city with peace of mind and head to the ominous valley where the ancient beasts gathered. Chapter 1155. The ominous valley was located 70,000 miles to the east of the demon city. It was a naturally formed valley with thousands of ferocious beasts living in it. The stronger ones were comparable to the late body integration stage, while the weaker ones were only at the soul formation stage. There was a huge difference in strength, but they all lived in harmony. Chinchuan didn't come here to find a mount for himself. He wanted to pick a baby beast for Lu Zi as a gift. After learning of Chinchuan's intentions, Dusk Snake said to Chinchuan, "In terms of attack power, the Skysplitter Condor is the strongest. In terms of comfort, the Snow Monster is the most comfortable. In terms of cuteness, the baby beast is definitely the best. What kind of ferocious beast would Master like to pick for mistress?" Chinchuan thought for a moment, then asked, "Are there any ferocious beasts that are compatible with the illusion element?" After hearing Chinchuan's request, Dusk Snake thought for a moment before answering, "Of course there are ferocious beasts that are compatible with the illusion element. Dream beasts are very suitable. However, they are relatively rare and difficult to raise." Chinchuan asked curiously, "What does a dream beast look like?" Dusk Snake looked into the ominous valley. After searching for a while, he pointed at a ball of light purple mist and said to Chinchuan, "That's a dream beast. Dream beasts aren't aggressive, but they have extremely strong hallucinogenic abilities. Those who come into contact with a dream beast will easily fall into a dreamland and be unable to extricate themselves unless their mental strength is very strong." After hearing Dusk Snake's description of the dream beast, Chinchuan looked at the ball of light purple mist and asked, "Is that a baby beast?" Dusk Snake nodded and said to Qin Chuan, "A dream beast will turn into a deep purple color when it reaches adulthood. The lighter the color, the younger the dream beast. This one looks like it was born not long ago, so it's still a faint purple. Now that it can leave its mother and move around on its own, it's a very suitable target." Qin Chuan observed the dream beast for a moment, then said to the mysterious snake, "That's it. Catch it." She waved gently at the dream beast when he heard Qin Chuan's order, and the dream beast naturally landed in his hand. He placed the dream beast into a jade bottle and passed it to Qin Chuan. "Master, the dream beast is already in there. You just need to channel a strand of spiritual energy or demon energy into the bottle every day to keep it alive. However, it's best if you let the dream beast's future master do it." Qin Chuan put away the jade bottle and said to Xianxi, "It's over, let's get ready to leave." Qin Chuan didn't plan to stay in the ruins for long. They had killed so many Protoss messengers, and the Protoss must have learned of the situation. They would definitely send people to Pegasus Star to investigate and exact revenge. He had to leave Pegasus Star before the Protoss arrived, return to Stansos, and sneak into the Holy Cluster with Lu Zi. Xianxi took out the badge he obtained from the Protoss messengers and said to Qin Chuan, "This old servant has been longing to see the outside world for a long time." Buzz. With a flash of light, Qin Chuan and Xianxi appeared on a plain on Pegasus Star. Above them was the entrance to Ancient Ruins number 36. Qin Chuan looked up at the entrance and said to Xianxi, "Let's go." Xianxi looked at the outside world with excitement and said to Qin Chuan, "If Master doesn't mind, this old servant is willing to be your mount." With Dusk Snake's strength, traversing the universe was no problem, but if Dusk Snake were to transform into his true form, it would be too conspicuous. Before they even reached Stansos, they would attract the attention of the Celestials. So, although Qin Chuan was tempted, he still rejected Dusk Snake's suggestion. Qin Chuan went straight to the Tian people stationed outside and borrowed a spaceship from the Tian people. Then, he and Xianxi boarded the spaceship and headed straight to Stansos. 5 days after Qin Chuan and Xianxi left Pegasus Star, the Protoss investigation team led by Red Archbishop Sam arrived at Pegasus Star. After flying for almost a month, Qin Chuan and Xianxi finally arrived at Stansos. However, they didn't go to District 2, but to District 5 instead. Lu Zi, who had been informed by Qin Chuan, was already waiting for Qin Chuan at District 5's Factory number 9. Qin Chuan couldn't help but want to get closer to Lu Zi. When Qin Chuan gave the Dream Beast to Lu Zi as a gift, Lu Zi was overjoyed and named the Dream Beast Little Chuan. Qin Chuan didn't know whether to laugh or cry. Now that the Hope was fully repaired and had successfully evolved from a low-grade sacred artifact to a mid-grade sacred artifact, Baiyu's combat power was comparable to a peak Dongshu realm expert. "Baiyu, this is Xianxi. He'll be working with you from now on. You'll be in charge during the operation and he'll listen to your orders." Qin Chuan looked at Baiyu and said solemnly, "Remember, unless absolutely necessary, don't enter the exiled land. The laws of heaven and earth there are very special. They'll suppress your strength to the peak nascent soul realm. I'm afraid you'll be in danger under those circumstances." Baiyu nodded at Qin Chuan's words. "I'll remember what you said. But where did you find this Xianxi? Will he really listen to my orders?" Baiyu could see that Dusk Snake was a peak body integration stage overlord, an existence on the same level as Heavenly Monarch Oliver of the Celestial race. She didn't have the confidence to command such a powerhouse. She lowered his head at Baiyu's words. "Miss Bai, this old servant is Master's servant. Since Master has given the order, this old servant will listen to all of Miss Bai's orders. Please don't worry, Miss Bai." Upon hearing Mystic Snake's words, Qin Chuan said to Baiyu, "You saw it. This is his attitude." Baiyu was completely at ease after hearing Xianxi's promise. She was very concerned about returning to the exiled land with Xian Shi and protecting it. Right, there's something I haven't had the chance to tell you. Do you know about the Forest of Eternity? Qin Chuan suddenly thought of the Forest of Eternity, the birthplace of the elven race. It should be a very important place to Bai Yu. Bai Yu smiled and said to Qin Chuan, "Of course I know about the Forest of Eternity. I've been in the Forest of Eternity before you sent me the message. It's the birthplace of the elven race. It's also the place the elven race sought to build the Hope. The Hope evolved into a mid-grade holy artifact there." Qin Chuan nodded and said to Bai Yu, "Trust me. If there's a chance in the future, I'll trade the Forest of Eternity with the Tian people and return it to the elven race." "Thank you, Qin Chuan." Bai Yu looked at Qin Chuan with touched eyes and said softly, "You'll be the elven race's friend forever." Chapter 1156. Stansos, District 1. Everyone in the Elder Council gathered together. The ninth elder held a message from the Protoss in his hand and said, "The Protoss has sent a message. They want us to capture Qin Chuan immediately and send him to Pegasus." Hearing the ninth elder's words, the seventh elder sneered and said, "What's wrong? Do the Protoss think that we Tian people are their vassals? They want us to capture Qin Chuan. Are we supposed to capture Qin Chuan?" The seventh elder's words were approved by most people. They couldn't agree to the Protoss request. Not to mention that Qin Chuan didn't do anything to harm the Tian people. The Protoss attitude made it impossible for them to agree to the Protoss request. The ninth elder smiled bitterly and said to everyone, "You don't know the specific situation yet. Qin Chuan has caused a big trouble this time." When everyone heard ninth elder's words, their faces were filled with curiosity as they asked, "What did Qin Chuan do this time?" Last time, Qin Chuan had a conflict with the Protoss, and then he killed the Protoss's son, Qin Chuan. The Protoss was suspected to be the incarnation of Atheus, so they swore to capture Qin Chuan before entering the ancient ruins. Could it be that Qin Chuan killed an important person among the Protoss in the ancient ruins? It can't be that he killed the high priest. In the face of everyone's curiosity, the ninth elder sighed and said, "The God Clan's 300 divine envoys have all fallen in the 36th ancient demon clan Rune. The one who killed them was Qin Chuan." Hearing the ninth elder's words, the scene fell into a dead silence. Everyone looked at the ninth elder in a daze. Even if they had overestimated Qin Chuan as much as possible, they were still shocked by Qin Chuan's actions. 300 oracles and 4 high priests were all dead? Isn't Qin Chuan only at the peak of Dongshu realm? How could he possess such terrifying strength? The ninth elder looked at the shocked expression on everyone's face and sighed. "At first, I didn't dare to believe it. But Thelon sent news that Qin Chuan really did kill 300 Protoss oracles. He didn't let a single one of them go. He once said that he would kill all of the Protoss in the ancient ruins. That wasn't a joke, he really did it." The fifth elder sucked in a breath of cold air. He had thought that Qin Chuan's actions on the deity planet back then were already shocking enough. However, compared to this battle record, it was like a child in the presence of a great sorcerer. The most important thing is that an overlord at the peak of combination realm suddenly appeared by Qin Chuan's side. No one knows the exact origin of this person. They only know that this person takes orders from Qin Chuan. The ninth elder's expression turned serious when he mentioned Xian Shi. An overlord at the peak of combination realm who suddenly appeared was definitely not to be ignored. An overlord at the peak of combination realm. The seventh elder frowned. Takes orders from Qin Chuan? How is that possible? In the universe, there were only a few overlords at the peak of combination realm. How could they lower themselves to take orders from Qin Chuan? The ninth elder nodded and replied, "That's right. The reason why Qin Chuan was able to kill the 300 oracles was because of this overlord at the peak of combination realm. Thelon sent news that this person should have left the 36th Demon Clan ruins together with Qinchuan. Thelon suspects that this person is a descendant of the Demon Clan. The ninth elder then told everyone about the discovery of the Demon City in the Demon Clan ruins. Qinchuan originally entered the 36th Demon Clan ruins with some rogue cultivators. Later, Qinchuan went into the Demon City alone, and that mysterious expert appeared by Qinchuan's side. The fourth elder frowned and said, "But isn't Qinchuan a human?" As he spoke, the fourth elder could not help but cast his gaze towards the second elder. Back then, the second elder had determined that Qinchuan was from the human race. After all, the second elder who had cultivated the heaven's heart connection would definitely not have made a mistake. Like the fourth elder, everyone looked at the second elder and wanted to hear how he would explain this matter. The second elder was silent for a moment and then said concisely, "Before meeting Qinchuan, Knight Serenity was at the exceptional Void Realm and had the bloodline of the third generation of the subdragon species. Now, Knight Serenity is at the early stage of the Combination Realm and has the bloodline of the first generation of the subdragon species." Everyone was stunned by the second elder's words. They had also investigated Knight Serenity and knew about the changes that had happened to Knight Serenity. But at that time they did not pay too much attention to it. After all, Knight Serenity only had the bloodline of the first generation of the subdragon species, not the bloodline of the real dragon. But now that the second elder mentioned this matter, they immediately realized that this matter was not as simple as they had imagined. "Do you mean that Qinchuan has the bloodline of the real dragon? Or does he have the bloodline of the real dragon himself?" The third elder was very surprised and said, "Does it mean that the reason why Knight Serenity's bloodline could evolve from the third generation of the subdragon species to the first generation of the subdragon species was because of Qinchuan? It's not her own lucky chance?" The second elder nodded and said no more. Everyone was completely stunned because of this. The sixth elder, who had just finished reading the information about the Demon City, projected a document in front of everyone and said, "This is the information about the Demon City. The city lords of the Demon City have all been descendants of the real dragon. If the mysterious expert following Qinchuan is really someone who has survived from ancient times, it is very likely that he is a descendant of the real dragon. But judging from the fact that he is only at the pinnacle of the combination realm, either this person was born a little late, or the bloodline of the real dragon in his body is not pure." After reading the information provided by the sixth elder, everyone fell silent. The eighth elder pondered for a moment and said, "The birth of an overlord at the pinnacle of the combination realm is not a small matter. We have to investigate it thoroughly. Since Qinchuan has returned to Stasos, let's invite him over and ask him clearly." The eighth elder's suggestion was approved by everyone. If they allowed an overlord at the pinnacle of the combination realm to roam freely in Stasos, they would not feel at ease. Forget it. At this moment, the first elder, who had been silent all this time, suddenly spoke. He looked at everyone and said indifferently, "Qinchuan has already left Stasos." Everyone frowned and said, "Then who is that mysterious expert?" The first elder replied, "They left together, but their destinations are not the same." Hearing the great elder's answer, everyone obviously wanted to ask more, but the great elder had no intention of answering them. He said in a rather indifferent tone, "Remember what I said before. Don't be an enemy, don't be a friend. Just wait and see." Chapter 1157. Deus Cluster, Messy Rock Star. As the border between the Deus Cluster and the Holy Cluster, Messy Rock Star had always been a lawless area. Therefore, it was a paradise for space pirates. As long as you were strong enough, you did not have to follow any rules here. If someone used rules to restrict you, then you could break the rules with your fist. If you could not do that, then it was best not to do anything out of line. and this was the place Qinchuan had to pass through on his way to the Holy Cluster. On this trip to the Holy Cluster, besides Lu Zi, Qinchuan also had Knight Serenity and Argentin by his side. The group of 4 disguised themselves as space tourists, so they did not attract much attention on Messy Rock Star. In a luxurious restaurant, Qinchuan's group of 4 sat at a table in the corner, waiting for the waiter to serve the local delicacies of Messy Rock Star. During this time, Knight Serenity was very vigilant in observing their surroundings and did not find anything that could threaten them. If we want to go to the Holy Cluster, do we need to join a space caravan here? Qinchuan looked at the information on the photon computer and said to everyone, "Is there any other way?" "Yes." Knight Serenity replied, "We can join a mercenary group and be hired by the Holy Cluster to go to the Holy Cluster with them." Qinchuan nodded slightly. There were 2 paths in front of them now. One was to join a space caravan with a pass to the 2 star clusters and enter the Holy Cluster with the caravan. The other was to become a mercenary and be hired by an employer to enter the Holy Cluster with the employer. Insu thought for a moment and said to Qinchuan, "Actually, it's very difficult for us to join a galactic caravan. Because we don't know where we come from, no galactic caravan will be willing to accept us. But if we reveal our true identities, we will definitely attract attention and go against the original intention of our secret operation. Anyone who could establish an interstellar caravan must have a powerful background. Even if the backer was an ancient powerful clan, it must be a powerful force that was second only to the ancient powerful clan. Therefore, the interstellar caravan did not lack powerhouses. It was very difficult for them to sneak into the interstellar caravan with their fake identities. Therefore, in Argentin's opinion, their only choice was to become a mercenary, find an employer, and enter the Holy Cluster with the employer. As long as they solved the most difficult problem of entering the Holy Cluster, they would have a way to solve the identity problem. Qinchuan looked at Knight Serenity and asked, "As a former space pirate, you should know about mercenaries. How do we do it?" Knight Serenity thought for a while and replied, "It's actually not difficult. We can either register a mercenary group or join a mercenary group. Both options have their pros and cons. If we register a mercenary group on our own, we will be relatively free to move around without any restrictions or fear of our identities being exposed. However, such a mercenary group will not have any records and will not be chosen by employers. If we join a mercenary group, although we can solve the problem of our records, our movements will definitely be restricted. There will also be a probation period, which is usually 3 months. Hearing Yi use words, Qinchuan couldn't help but feel a headache coming on. His time was incomparably precious to begin with. If he were to waste 3 months on something like the probation period, it wouldn't be worth it. Lu Zi asked Knight Serenity curiously, "Then can we register a mercenary group and take the initiative to look for an employer?" Yi thought for a moment and replied, "We can, but if we do that, others will definitely suspect our motives. Then let's be honest. We will provide protection for the employer for free, and the employer will be responsible for bringing us into the Holy Cluster. We can sign a contract." Lu Zi said to everyone, "If we reveal that one of us is an overlord in the body integration stage, I think it will be easy to get the job done." Lu Zi's words made sense. However, where could they find such an employer? "Bastard, what are you trying to do?" Just as Qinchuan and the others were thinking about this problem, a quarrel suddenly broke out in the restaurant, attracting everyone's attention. At a table, a member of the Iron Tower clan was flirting with a member of the Succubus clan who wore a black miniskirt. Most people were already used to this, and they paid attention to this matter as if they were watching a show. "What am I trying to do? Don't you know that?" The Iron Tower man laughed out loud and looked at the Meizu woman with a lecherous gaze. "Locke, I'm warning you. You'd better not mess around. Otherwise, when my sister comes back, she will definitely not let you off." The Meizu woman threatened the Iron Tower man. You know that she will definitely chop off your claws. The Iron Tower man called Locke sneered and said, Karo, stop dreaming. Bela will never come back. Karo heard him and said angrily, What nonsense are you talking about? Locke looked at Karo playfully and replied, I'm telling the truth. Bela should be waiting on the bed for Master Auk to come to her. Hearing Locke's words, Karo's expression changed drastically and she exclaimed, You're deliberately framing Bela. That's right, that's it. Bela is too arrogant and doesn't care about us at all. Now that she has found a good home, you should have a good home too. Locke laughed sinisterly and pulled Karo into his arms. His large hands wandered around Karo's body wantonly. Karo screamed continuously, but no one stepped forward to help her. It was obviously not worth offending Locke, who was at the peak of the insightful void realm, for a woman from the Meizu. Just as Locke was done teasing Karo and was about to take Karo away, a figure suddenly appeared in front of Locke and said indifferently, Let her go. Locke was about to get angry at the person who had disturbed his good mood when he heard this. However, when he sensed the vast aura from the other party, his face turned pale and he let go of Karo in fear. Beads of cold sweat rolled down his forehead, revealing his inner turmoil. Scram! If you dare to gossip about what happened today, I'll send you to the underworld. Hearing this cold voice, Locke felt as if he had been granted amnesty and hurriedly fled the restaurant. When the onlookers saw this scene, their expressions became exceptionally strange. They looked at the black-robed man standing next to Karo with reverence. Only an overlord at the peak of the insightful void realm could make Locke, who was at the peak of the insightful void realm, so afraid. Chapter 1158. If the crowd could guess the identity of the mysterious black-robed man, so could Karo. She gratefully looked at the mysterious black-robed man and repeatedly said, Thank you for saving me, thank you for saving me, thank you for saving me. Come with me. The mysterious black-robed man turned and slowly walked towards a table in the corner. Karo followed behind him. After the mysterious black-robed man sat down, she stood to the side, trembling with fear. She looked at the other three mysterious black-robed men sitting at the table with curiosity and awe. I think she's a good employer, said a man. A man's voice sounded, but first she needs to have a pass to the Saint Star cluster. The person who spoke was none other than Qinchuan, who was still worrying about how to sneak into the holy cluster. The person who saved Karo was naturally Knight Serenity, who obeyed Qinchuan's orders. When Qinchuan saw what happened to Karo and overheard the conversation between Karo and Karo, he realized that this was a good opportunity for them. Even if Karo didn't have a pass to the holy cluster, they could just treat it as doing a good deed and not lose anything. Upon hearing Qinchuan's words, Karo immediately responded, Sir, although I don't know what you want me to do, I'll do my best. Qinchuan chuckled and asked Karo, Do you have a pass to enter the holy cluster? Karo nodded and replied, I'm a member of the holy cluster, so of course I have a pass to enter the holy cluster. Qinchuan and the others weren't surprised by Karo's answer because the Meizu was a race that lived in the holy cluster. As a member of the Meizu, it was normal for Karo to have a pass to enter the holy cluster. However, as a member of the Meizu, Karo couldn't enter the holy cluster as she pleased. She was only allowed to enter the holy cluster for 2 months every year and was forbidden to do so at any other time. Qinchuan looked at Karo from head to toe and couldn't help but think of Mei. Compared to the unrestrained Mei, Karo looked much more serious. He asked Karo, In another 10 days, you can use your pass, right? Karo nodded and replied, Yes, sir. In another 10 days, I can use my pass to enter the holy cluster. Very good. Qinchuan smiled and said to Karo, Then as a reward for saving your life, you will be responsible for bringing the 4 of us into the holy cluster. How about that? We will form a mercenary group and follow you as mercenaries. Karo nodded at Qinchuan's words and said, "Sir, I'm willing to help you enter the holy cluster." Seeing that Karo was so tactful, Qinchuan was in a very good mood. Just as he was about to enjoy the delicious food, Karo mustered up her courage and said to Qinchuan, "Sir, can I really hire you for once?" Qinchuan was slightly surprised when he heard this, then smiled and said, "Let me guess. You want to hire us to find your sister Bela?" Karo nodded vigorously and said to Qinchuan, "Sir, I have a lot of star stones, and so does my sister. As long as you are willing to help us, I am willing to give you everything I have." Qinchuan smiled and looked at Karo with a playful gaze. He asked, "What makes you think that we will really be hired by you? Or are you planning to use the past to threaten me?" Karo's expression changed when she heard Qinchuan's words. She hurriedly said to Qinchuan, "Sir, I definitely don't mean that. I really want to ask for your help." "Tell me about it." Qinchuan crossed his arms and said to Karo, "Tell us about your sister's situation. If it is not complicated, I don't mind helping you once." Karo was pleasantly surprised when she heard this. She bowed to Qinchuan and said, "Thank you, sir." After thanking Qinchuan, Karo said to Qinchuan, "Sir, you should know about the Meizu. In the Meizu, both men and women are the most beautiful. My sister Bela is even more beautiful. If it were not for Bela's excellent cultivation talent and the fact that she is already an almighty cultivator at the peak of the Dongshu realm, she might have been imprisoned by some big shot and become his exclusive property. However, although Bela is already an almighty cultivator at the peak of the Dongshu realm, there are still people in this world that she can't afford to offend. Those are the overlords at the body integration stage. Ok is such a person. Ok took a fancy to Bela and wanted to take her as his exclusive property. Bela refused, so Bela and I found an opportunity to escape from the holy cluster. We came to Rubble Star and established a mercenary group here. Bela relied on her powerful strength and outstanding charm to quickly expand the mercenary group and became a famous mercenary group leader on Rubble Star. A year ago, Locke, who was Bela's assistant, received a mission with a very generous reward. However, this mission required him to go to the Holy Cluster. Bela chose to take the risk for the generous reward. She left for a year and hasn't returned since. As a mercenary, it's normal to be out on missions all year round. I didn't suspect anything at first. It wasn't until Locke suddenly had designs on me and wanted to play with me that I realized something was wrong. So, I escaped from the mercenary group headquarters and came here. However, I didn't expect Locke to chase after me and say those words. This made me realize that Bela must have been deceived by Locke. That mission was fake and the real mastermind must be Ok. I really can't imagine what kind of torture Bela would suffer if she fell into Ok's hands. So, I beg all of you to help me save Bela from Ok. Qinchuan didn't feel any sympathy for Karo's words. He asked Karo indifferently, "What price do you think you can pay for us to become enemies with a universe overlord?" Karo heard Qinchuan's words and gritted her teeth. She said to Qinchuan, "Sir, I'm willing to be your concubine. I'm still a virgin." After hearing Karo's words, Qinchuan subconsciously looked at Karo from head to toe. He had to admit that Meizu's appearance was impeccable. However, when a small foot stepped on the back of Qinchuan's foot, Qinchuan realized that he had done something wrong. "I'm not interested in taking you as my concubine. I need something more practical in return." Qinchuan gently held Lu Zi's hand on the table and said to Karo, "You still have 10 days. You can seriously think about what you can offer me. If you can't do it, then I'm sorry, I won't help you." Chapter 1159. Qinchuan had never been a kind-hearted person who was easily moved. Their trip to the Holy Cluster this time wasn't for sightseeing, nor was it to do good deeds. If it wasn't necessary, Qinchuan didn't want to have a conflict with anyone, especially with a combination stage overlord. No one knew what kind of background she had and who was behind her. Qin Chuan was sure that if his identity was exposed in the Holy Cluster, the chances of him leaving the Holy Cluster alive would be extremely slim. Therefore, if Caro couldn't offer him something that he was interested in, he would definitely not cause any more trouble. However, there were still some things that needed to be done, such as cleaning up some irrelevant people. That night, Qin Chuan asked Argentin and Knight Serenity to follow Caro to clean up the Leap mercenary group established by Bela and Caro. Not a single person was spared. The reason he did this was to make it easier for him to control Caro and eliminate some discordant voices in the mercenary group. Although Locke definitely wouldn't dare to resist, no one could guarantee that Locke wouldn't tell Oak, who was far away in the Saint Star cluster, about what happened today. Another reason was to warn Carol that they weren't so easy to deal with and would still kill. Obviously, after personally participating in the massacre, Caro's attitude towards Qin Chuan and the others became more respectful. At the same time, she began to feel anxious. It wasn't easy for her to meet such a strong group of people like Qin Chuan. If she didn't take this opportunity to rescue Bela, she didn't know where she would find such a good opportunity again. In the inn, Qin Chuan and LVZ sat at a table and drank tea. The tea leaves were taken with them when they left the banished land. Even now, they still hadn't finished drinking it. It wasn't because there were a lot of tea leaves, but because the two of them would only drink this tea when they were together again. That was why they drank this tea very slowly. These tea leaves were personally planted by teacher Ningya. Every time I drink it, I can almost smell the fragrance on teacher Ningya's body. LVZ sipped her tea as she recalled the past, feeling rather emotional. Qin Chuan raised his eyebrows and smiled. Is that so? Why don't I smell any fragrance? Maybe it's because you're too close to teacher Ningya. Lu Zi smiled. After all, you two are teacher and disciple. When Ningya was mentioned, Qin Chuan also missed her greatly. Even now, he could still remember the first time he had met Ningya. Ningya had given him a Black Moon Combat Academy badge and opened the path for him to become a talisman array master. When he was still weak, Ningya had always carefully protected him. Ningya was the only teacher that Qin Chuan had ever acknowledged, and she would also be Qin Chuan's teacher for the rest of his life. Lu Zi put down her teacup and asked Qin Chuan, "How are you going to deal with Caro?" When Qin Chuan heard this, he smiled faintly and replied, "I have already made it very clear today. If she can't take out a bargaining chip that can move my heart, then I will definitely not help her. This is a transaction that will not be mixed with anything else. If she wants to play some tricks, then don't blame me for being ruthless and destroying a flower." Hearing Qin Chuan's reply, Lu Zi sighed. Actually, she and Bela are both pitiful people. In this universe where the strong prey on the weak, if a woman is too beautiful and doesn't have the strength to protect herself, then it will definitely be very difficult. Lu Zi could actually understand Bela and Caro's difficulties. This was because she had experienced the same thing before. Back at the Duke's mansion in Rose City, she had been targeted. If not for Qin Chuan's timely arrival, her fate would have been very miserable. Therefore, Lu Zi was very grateful that Qin Chuan was always by her side. Qin Chuan heard Lu Zi's words and asked, "You want to help them?" Lu Zi shook her head and said, "Sympathy is one thing, but some things can't be decided on the spur of the moment. We're going to the Holy Cluster this time, and we may encounter a lot of dangers here. If it's not necessary, I don't want to provoke strangers who don't need to be provoked." Buzz. The door of the room was opened from the outside, and Knight Serenity walked in with a key card in his hand. He said to Qin Chuan, "It's done." Locke didn't have time to reveal the matter. "Argentin will be on duty tonight." Qin Chuan nodded and asked Knight Serenity, "Did Caro do anything unusual?" Yiyu shook his head and replied, "She invited us to visit her treasury, which is her storage ring. She wanted us to help her come up with some ideas and see if there's anything that can tempt you. Unfortunately, the items in her possession are all worthless. The most valuable one is a medium-quality saint artifact. I don't think you'll be interested in it. However, she told me that the real good things are with Bela, but I don't think Bela has anything good. Qinchuan smiled and said to Knight Serenity, "You're right. It seems that Karo won't be able to take out anything that can move me." Just as Qinchuan finished speaking, a call came from outside the room. It was Argentine who was on duty outside. "Qinchuan, Karo is here. She wants to see you." Qinchuan raised his eyebrows slightly and said to Argentine, "Let her in. You come in too." When the door opened, Argentine and Karo walked in together. Karo looked at Qinchuan with some uneasiness and said, "I've already checked all my savings. There's nothing that can move you." Looking at Karo's dejected expression, Qinchuan smiled faintly and said, "So what do you mean by looking for me now? Are you trying to move me in some other way? I said that I only want benefits." Karo hesitated and said to Qinchuan, "I have some secrets that no one knows. I don't know if I can use them to make a deal." Qinchuan raised his eyebrows slightly and said, "You have to tell me. After I hear it, I can judge whether it can be used to make a deal or not. But you have to think carefully. Once you say it, the secret won't be a secret anymore." Karo gritted her teeth and said to Qinchuan, "I'm willing to try." Qinchuan pointed to a chair and said to Karo, "Sit down and talk slowly." Karo walked to the chair and sat down. After organizing her words, she said to Qinchuan, "Bela and I have been wandering around for the past few years and have heard many rumors. After some investigation, we found that some of the rumors were not rumors, but true." Qinchuan looked at Karo curiously and said, "For example?" Karo pursed her lips and said to Qinchuan, "On an uninhabited abandoned planet in the Holy Cluster, there is a large amount of psionic ore storage." Chapter 1160. When he heard Karo reveal this secret, Qinchuan was actually a little disappointed. Although psionic energy ores were very valuable minerals, a psionic energy mine in the Holy Cluster was obviously not attractive to Qinchuan. He could not stay in the Holy Cluster to mine psionic energy ores. Even if he managed to mine them, he had no way to transport them out. As for selling psionic energy ores in the Holy Cluster, it was no different from committing suicide. Moreover, Qinchuan felt that if Karo knew about the psionic energy mine, others might know about it as well. Perhaps a large number of people were mining psionic energy ores on that planet at this time. Seeing the obvious disappointment on Qinchuan's face, Karo knew that Qinchuan was not interested in this news, so she immediately said, "In addition to psionic energy ores, I also know that someone has a high-grade sacred artifact, and it's a defensive high-grade sacred artifact. This information is very secretive. I can guarantee that no more than 5 people in the world know about it." A high-grade sacred artifact was definitely a treasure, but Karo did not see any interest on Qinchuan's face. This made Karo panic. Qinchuan sighed and said to Karo, "If this is the only secret you're talking about, then you can leave." "Wait a minute." Right at this moment, LVZ suddenly spoke, and this allowed Karo, who was already in despair, to see a trace of hope. Lu Zi gave Qinchuan a look to calm down, then said to Karo, "Actually, you don't have to rack your brains to think about these so-called unknown secrets. We came to the Holy Cluster this time because we are most interested in the Master of the Holy Cluster. Do you have any information about the insect, the Holy Clan?" Hearing Lu Zi's words, Karo was slightly stunned. Qinchuan, on the other hand, was interested. Why didn't he think of asking Karo about Zerg? Hearing Lu Zi asking about Zerg, Karo frowned after thinking for a while and said, "Although the Holy Clan is the ruler of the Holy Cluster, they have always been very mysterious. Except for some holy envoys, they rarely act outside. I don't know much about the Holy Clan." Qinchuan and Lu Zi were a little disappointed when they heard Karo's answer. Lu Zi did not expect that Karo still could not tell them any exciting secrets after she gave her a reminder and care. There was nothing she could do. However, I do know something that a lot of people know, Karo said hesitantly. This matter is related to the Holy Clan, but you don't have to ask me. Qin Chuan smiled and said to Karo, just say it. As long as the information is useful to us, it's yours. Hearing Qin Chuan's answer, Karo's face immediately showed a look of surprise, and she quickly said, a few years ago, the Holy Clan had a large-scale operation. At that time, many people were curious about what the Holy Clan was going to do. Then, not long after, news of the destruction of Tron Nebula's Tron capital came. Because this time happened to be close to the time of the Holy Clan's operation, many people guessed that it was the Holy Clan who destroyed Tron Nebula. Qin Chuan's expression immediately became serious when he heard Karo's words. He knew very well that this guess was right. It was Zerg who destroyed Tron Nebula. What else do you know? Qin Chuan looked deeply at Karo. Don't wait for me to ask, tell me everything. Seeing that Qin Chuan was so concerned about this matter, Karo immediately continued. At that time, when the Holy Clan troops returned to the Holy Cluster, they had a short rest in Chaos Rock Star. At that time, some Holy Clan people were eating and chatting outside, and they mentioned some things about the human race. Some people suspected that the large-scale operation of the Holy Clan this time was related to the disappearance of the ancient humans, but these were just rumors, and no one took them seriously. Hearing Karo's words, Qin Chuan took a deep breath and asked Karo, do you remember how the Holy Clan people specifically mentioned the human race at that time? Karo lowered her head and frowned for a long time, then replied, sorry, I only heard about it at that time. I wasn't at the scene, so I don't know what they said specifically, but I know the person who was at the scene. He must remember what happened at that time. Qin Chuan pursed his lips and said to Karo, bring that person to see me. Knight Serenity, you go with her. Knight Serenity saw that Qin Chuan attached great importance to this matter, so naturally, she didn't dare to neglect it. Karo also hoped that this matter could move Qin Chuan and persuade him to rescue Bela. Of course, she was very enthusiastic and couldn't wait to bring that person back to see Qin Chuan. After Knight Serenity and Karo left, Qin Chuan's tense expression finally relaxed and became extremely gloomy and ugly. Lu Zi's expression was also very ugly because she knew very well that Zerg had always known about the existence of the human race and the land of exile. Since Zerg mentioned the human race, something very important must have happened. Qin Chuan, do you think that Zerg went to Tron Nebula that time in addition to destroying Tron Capital? He also went to the land of exile? Speaking of the land of exile, Lu Zi couldn't help but feel a little worried. Qin Chuan shook his head and said, it's meaningless for us to make wild guesses now. Moreover, the laws of heaven and earth in the land of exile are very strange. No matter how powerful a person is, their realm will be suppressed to the perfect nascent soul stage when they go there. Zerg won't have any advantage if he goes there. I believe that the land of exile should still be safe for now. Hearing Qin Chuan's comforting words, Lu Zi was still very nervous. After all, it wasn't the first time that Zerg attacked the land of exile. They had been away from the land of exile for more than 10 years. No one knew what happened in the land of exile during this period of time. Could the human race and shifter race resist Zerg's invasion again? She couldn't wait to know what Zerg said at that time. Soon, Knight Serenity and Karo came back with a man. This man was a member of the Leap mercenary group. He was a diehard fan of Karo and Bela. His name was Storm, and he was from the Wind Clan. On the way here, Karo had already told Storm about this matter. Storm was also mentally prepared. Facing Qin Chuan and Lu Zi's gaze, he replied, at that time, I was drinking in the same bar as those two Zerg people. Because I was sitting close to them, and because I'm very sensitive to sounds, I heard some intermittent conversations. After hearing Storm's nonsense, Qinchuan couldn't help but ask, "Get to the point." Storm immediately replied, "Human race, accidental escape, the other one, that's all I heard." Chapter 1161. Human, accidentally escaped, another one. Qinchuan could not help but fall into deep thought when he heard Storm's words. Although these few simple words contained very little information, it was enough for Qinchuan to fill in a lot of things in his mind. At this time, Knight Serenity and the others had been sent away by Lu Zi. Only Qinchuan and Lu Zi were left in the room. They were both quietly thinking about the problem. In the long silence, neither of them made a sound. Human, accidentally escaped, another one. Qinchuan murmured in a low voice, frowning. It seems that Zerg already knows that someone has left the banished land and has even locked onto me. As for the other one, does it mean that there are other people who have left the banished land? Hearing Qinchuan's words, Lu Zi pursed her lips and said, "After we left, the people who had the chance to leave the banished land were the ancients. The ancients that Lu Zi mentioned were Qin Fenghua, Qian Wujin, Shimen Weiyang, and Yi Ting. When they left, they had promised that as long as the four of them could cultivate a qualified successor, they could leave the banished land on Zerg's spaceship and head to the outside world. If there was anyone who had the chance to leave the banished land after them, it would definitely be one of the four." Qinchuan nodded. "I even guessed that when they were piloting Zerg's spaceship, they might have been inadvertently detected by Zerg. That's why Zerg went to Tron Nebula on a large scale." Lu Zi's expression changed slightly. She said to Qinchuan, "Could it be that one of them was captured by Zerg? It's not impossible." Qinchuan's tone was a little low as he said, "The reason why the Zergs went to the Tron Nebula was most likely because they heard my name from them. Then, they locked onto me and wanted to kill me. But coincidentally, I was taken away from the Tushan clan by Duoluan under your name. That's how I escaped this disaster." Qinchuan was almost certain that even if what he guessed was not the truth, it was not far from the truth. He suddenly felt a little lucky. If Duoluan had not taken him away, he might not even have the chance to wake up before he died at Zerg's hands. Hearing Qinchuan's guess, Lu Zi's expression changed again. "They betrayed the human race." Qinchuan pursed his lips and said, "When they first entered the universe, even if they were lucky, they would only become early-stage apotheosis realm cultivators. And the person they had to face was the powerful Zerg. Even if they were unwilling to betray us, Zerg must have 10,000 ways to pry open their mouths. Doesn't that mean that Zerg already knows that you are a human and even that I am a human? If that's the case, why haven't they done anything to us?" Lu Zi was very puzzled. Since Zerg destroyed Qinchuan and the entire capital of Tron, he must want to get rid of Qinchuan as soon as possible. In that case, there was no reason why they had not taken any new action until now. Qinchuan took a deep look at Lu Zi and said, "Have you forgotten about the Void Empire? There is a collusion between Zerg and the Void Empire." Lu Zi did not know about the Lotus of the Void, but Qinchuan had already guessed that the reason why Zerg had not taken action against him must be that Zerg was confident in the Lotus of the Void and thought that he could not escape the erosion of the Lotus of the Void. Lu Zi saw the gloomy look on Qinchuan's face and asked, "Are you still hiding something from me?" Since things had developed to this point, Qinchuan no longer hid it. He took off his shirt and presented the Lotus of the Void on his chest to Lu Zi. He said to Lu Zi, "When I was investigating the Void Empire, I once met a late-stage combination realm powerhouse from the Void Empire. At that time, I had no power to fight back and was planted with the power of the Void. If I can't resolve this power of the Void within 3 years, I will be eroded and turn into a Void creature. Now I only have 1 year left." Hearing Qinchuan's words and seeing the Lotus of the Void on Qinchuan's chest, Lu Zi subconsciously raised her hand to cover her mouth. Tears flowed out of her eyes in an instant. She could not help but ask Qin Chuan, "Why didn't you tell me such an important thing until now?" Qin Chuan smiled bitterly and said, "The more people know about this, the more people will worry about me. I don't want you to worry too much because it is meaningless." Hearing Qin Chuan's words, Lu Zi held back her tears and said in an incomparably firm tone, "I will never let you be eroded by the power of the void." Qin Chuan smiled and said, "I will also do my best to not be eroded by the power of the void." After crying, Lu Zi also calmed down and asked Qin Chuan, "What do you plan to do next?" Qin Chuan thought for a moment and said to Lu Zi, "Our plan will not change. We will still sneak into the Holy Cluster and investigate this matter. We will find out who left the exiled land and fell into Zerg's hands. I am very glad that I made the decision to let Bai Yu and Mysterious Snake protect the exiled land. Perhaps they went there at the right time." The exiled land, the Air Center. Ever since Qin Chuan defeated Zerg's Red Vanguard and took back the Air Center, the existence of the Air Center was no longer a secret. It was no longer a place to cultivate heirs. Instead, it was used as the first line of defense for both humans and demons to resist the invasion. Today, this line of defense was finally unable to hold on against the Zerg's ferocious attacks again and again. As the highest commander on the front line, Chen Chongqing stood on a tall building and looked at the battlefield in front of him with a serious expression. There were only 3 of the 32 fortifications that had not been breached yet. Once these 3 fortifications were breached, they would be forced to fight Zerg head-on. Long Xiao, who was wearing a black combat suit, walked over slowly and said to Chen Chongqing, "Chongqing, I have already set up 2 level 4 defense rune arrays in front of the last fortification. Perhaps it can hold on for a while longer." Chen Chongqing sighed and said, "It's meaningless. Can't hold on for long." Long Xiao looked at Chen Chongqing with a complicated expression and said, "Let's retreat. We can't have too many people die here." Chen Chongqing gritted his teeth and said, "I am the highest commander on the front line. I cannot retreat." Long Xiao frowned and said, "Why are you doing this? No one will blame you for this." Boss took this back with great difficulty. "I can't lose it in my hands." Chen Chongqing gritted his teeth and said, "I have made up my mind. When the time comes, I will lead the Black Heaven sect disciples to cover everyone's retreat. We will fight to the death." Chapter 1162. Hearing Chen Chongqing's words, Long Xiao could not help but think of the person who had always held up the sky for them. The expression on her face became more complicated. She sighed and said, "If Qin Chuan was still here, do you think we can hold on?" "Of course we can, we definitely can. Boss has never let us down when it comes to fighting against the Zergs, and he has never let us down in any other aspect. Don't forget, Boss is the miracle child, the strongest person among us humans and shifters." Chen Chongqing replied without hesitation. He had absolute confidence in Qin Chuan. If Qin Chuan was still here, he could guarantee that these damned Zerg would not even be able to break through their first line of defense. It's a pity that he left. It's been almost 15 years, and he hasn't come back. There's also no news about him. If it wasn't for the fact that teacher Ningya still had Qin Chuan's life token, I would have thought that he had already died outside. But if he's still alive, it's been 15 years. Did he not think of coming back? Long Xiao sighed again. She also felt that Qin Chuan would not let Zerg break through the center of the Kunlun field so easily. However, Qin Chuan was no longer here. There was no point in thinking about these things. Perhaps one day, when Qin Chuan came back from the outside, what awaited him would be hell on earth. Just as Chen Chongqing and Long Xiao were talking, 2 more lines of defense were broken through. Now they only had 1 line of defense left. Zerg's attack was too fierce. Perhaps in less than 10 minutes, they would have to face Zerg's army directly. Crimson Army. It's the Crimson Army again. Why can't they kill all of them? Chen Chongqing looked at Zerg's army in the distance and gritted his teeth. He had already drawn his sword and was ready to attack. Long Xiao looked at Chen Chongqing and asked, "Are you really not leaving? If you don't think for yourself, don't you think for Senior Lan and the child in her stomach?" Hearing Long Xiao mention Lan Xuxin, Chen Chongqing's face showed a hint of struggle. He gritted his teeth and said to Long Xiao, "Take care of her for me." Long Xiao wanted to persuade Chen Chongqing again, but at that moment, Zerg suddenly gave up on attacking the last line of defense. He turned around and hurriedly retreated. Seeing this, Chen Chongqing and Long Xiao were extremely shocked. They didn't understand what was going on. Why would Zerg give up on the air center, which was so close to being his? And in the universe they couldn't see, a spaceship as tall as a tree was chasing after Zerg's fleet. On the Hope's deck, Bai Yu's gaze was sharp and cold as she stared at the Zerg fleet. She told Black Snake, who was standing beside her, "Senior, kill these Zerg, don't leave a single one alive." The center of the airs. Chen Chongqing and Long Xiao stood on top of a tall building, gazing into the distance. It had been half a day since Zerg retreated, and Zerg had yet to return. If it wasn't for the chaotic battlefield, they would have thought that Zerg's invasion was just a dream. Did they really retreat? Even though he saw it with his own eyes, Chen Chongqing still couldn't believe it. He couldn't figure out why Zerg would suddenly retreat. Long Xiao couldn't figure it out, but she knew that this was a good thing. She turned to Chen Chongqing and said, "I've already contacted Star Dragon City. The Federation and the Demon Realm weren't attacked by the insectoid. They really did retreat." Chen Chongqing turned his head to look at Long Xiao. His gaze was strange. "Could it be that your two rune matrices forced them to retreat?" Long Xiao smiled coldly and said, "You're thinking too much. I'm still very clear about my own capabilities. Maybe this is just a temporary strategic retreat, but no matter what, it's a good thing for us. Send people to repair the defense immediately. I will continue to inscribe rune matrices and try to repair as many as possible before Zerg's next attack." Chen Chongqing nodded. The most important thing right now was to prepare for Zerg's next attack. What Chen Chongqing and Long Xiao didn't know was that Zerg's next attack wouldn't come for a very long time. This was because Zerg's fleet had been annihilated by Dusk Snake. These Zerg soldiers were only at the early stage of the Dongxi realm. There was no way they could withstand Dusk Snake's destructive attack. Bai Yu listened to Qinchuan's suggestion and didn't enter the center of the airs. Instead, she and Dusk Snake stood guard in the Dark Universe. They would replace the center of the airs and become the first line of defense for the exiled land. If Zerg wanted to attack the center of the airs again, he would have to defeat them first. Messy Rockstar. Qinchuan's attempts to contact Bai Yu or Dusk Snake ended in failure. This meant that Bai Yu and Dusk Snake had entered the Dark Universe and might have found the exiled land. This was neither good nor bad news. On the other hand, Night Serenity had erased Storm's memories of last night according to Lu Zi's orders. Caro had signed a contract that forbade her from telling anyone what happened last night for the rest of her life. Caro had signed the contract willingly because Qinchuan had promised her that he would deal with Auk and rescue Bela. Now, all they had to do was wait for the interstellar portal to the Holy Cluster to open and they could depart. During this time, Caro had helped Qinchuan and the others complete the mercenary registration. Qinchuan and the others were now members of the Leap mercenary group. As long as Caro led them, they could freely enter the Holy Cluster. After 10 days of torment, Caro could hardly wait to lead Qinchuan and the others into the Holy Cluster. Qinchuan stood by the window of the spaceship and looked at the giant interstellar portal in front of them. As long as they entered the portal, they would enter the Holy Cluster and enter Zerg's territory. "Are you nervous?" Lu Zi looked at Qinchuan. "Maybe Zerg has been watching us closely all this time, waiting for us to walk into their trap." Qinchuan smiled. If they really have the ability to do so, then it's not wrong for us to die in their hands. But before we die, I'm confident that I can kill enough Zerg to be my scapegoat. Luzi reached out and held Qinchuan's hand. After we figure out what happened here, we'll return to the banished land. Qinchuan nodded and held Luzi's hand tightly. I'll listen to you. While Qinchuan and Luzi were talking, Zerg's troops stationed at the interstellar portal had already checked Caro's pass and let them through. When the spaceship slowly entered the interstellar portal, Qinchuan's breathing could not help but quicken. Zerg, I'm here. Chapter 1163. There wasn't much difference between the Holy Cluster and the Celestial Cluster. After the spaceship passed through the interstellar portal, Qinchuan saw an ordinary universe. Other than the few Zerg soldiers who were obviously wearing Zerg armor, everything was fine. After a new round of inspection, they were once again allowed to move freely in the Holy Cluster. Of course, they couldn't go to Zerg's territory. They could only go to the public areas that belonged to all the races. After the spaceship left the interstellar portal, Caro couldn't wait to find Qinchuan. Sir, we're safe now. What do you plan to do next? Qinchuan looked at the anxious expression on Caro's face. He knew that Caro must want to find Auk immediately and save Bela. After thinking for a while, Qinchuan said to the anxious Caro, "Tell me about Auk." Caro was relieved when she heard this. She quickly said, "Auk is from the Iron Tower race. He's the leader of the Iron Tower race, an overlord in the middle stage of the combination stage. Most of the Iron Tower race are gathered on the Iron Tower planet. They've always been the vassals of the Holy Clan and served the Holy Clan. Auk is very strong, especially in terms of defense. He's definitely one of the best in the same stage. Very few people can break through his defense. Other than Auk, the Iron Tower race has another overlord in the combination stage called Rant. He's in the early stage of the combination stage and has always been Auk's right-hand man." Caro looked at Qinchuan nervously. After all, she had never told Qinchuan that there was another overlord in the combination stage by Auk's side. However, she was relieved when she saw that Qinchuan's expression didn't change. Obviously, Qinchuan didn't care how many overlords in the combination stage the Iron Tower race had. Qinchuan asked Caro, "What do you plan to do? Kill Auk and Rant directly?" Caro couldn't help but have some strange thoughts when she heard Qinchuan's words. It was as if Qinchuan thought that killing 2 overlords in the combination stage was as easy as killing 2 chicks. If she knew that more than 20 overlords in the combination stage had died directly or indirectly at the hands of Qinchuan, she probably wouldn't have such strange thoughts. Caro thought for a moment and said to Qinchuan, "Killing Auk and Rant is definitely the simplest and most effective way. However, the Iron Tower planet's security is very tight. It'll be difficult for us to break in with so many people." Qinchuan thought for a moment and asked Caro, "If the Iron Tower planet is attacked, will the insect holy race come to help?" Caro looked at Qinchuan with a strange expression and said, "Sir, do you hate Saint Zerg?" Qinchuan chuckled and said, "You should answer my question first." Caro thought for a moment and said, "If the Iron Tower planet is attacked, Auk will definitely ask Saint Zerg for help. However, Zerg's reinforcements won't be able to arrive in time. It'll take at least 2 to 3 days, unless Zerg happens to have a combination stage overlord on the Iron Tower planet." Qinchuan thought for a moment and asked Luzi, "What do you think?" Luzi replied, "I suggest we keep a low profile. After all, killing 2 combination stage overlords is not a small matter. Not everyone can do it. If it's not a last resort, it's best if we can save Bela without bloodshed." Luzi paused for a moment and said, "However, Auk will definitely keep Bela by his side. If we want to save Bela, we can't avoid Auk." Qinchuan thought for a moment and asked Caro, "In the Holy Cluster, Who is the enemy of the Iron Tower race? The arch-enemy. Karo heard Qinchuan's words and knew that Qinchuan wanted to frame them. She said to Qinchuan, "The Iron Tower race has many enemies, but the archenemy is definitely the Wind race." Hearing Karo's answer, Qinchuan asked, "Is the Wind race also one of Zerg's vassals? If the Wind race exterminated the Iron Tower race, what are the consequences?" Zerg doesn't restrict his vassals from fighting each other. Instead, he encourages this behavior. The weak are prey to the strong. Only the strong can gain Zerg's favor. If the Wind race exterminated the Iron Tower race, Zerg won't interfere. Moreover, the benefits that originally belonged to the Iron Tower race will go to the Wind race. Karo paused for a moment and then asked Qinchuan hesitantly, "Mister, are you trying to borrow the Wind race's power? I'm afraid it will be difficult to gain their trust." Qinchuan smiled and said to Karo, "I don't plan to borrow their power. I just want to borrow their name. You should have the contact of the Wind race, right? Find someone with a higher status and send them an anonymous message. If they are willing to take the blame, I will give them a big gift." Iron Tower Planet was located in the northwest of the Holy Cluster. It was a relatively remote location. The more than 200 solar systems in this area were all managed by the Iron Tower race. The Iron Tower race could keep 30% of the benefits they obtained from these 200 solar systems. The remaining 70% would be handed over to Zerg. When Qinchuan and the others arrived at the outskirts of Iron Tower Planet, it was already 10 days later. Qinchuan stood in front of the porthole and looked at the Iron Tower Planet that was almost transformed into a metal planet. It was as if he was looking at Tu Huayuan. However, compared to Tu Huayuan, Iron Tower Planet's defense was obviously stronger. Karo stood beside Qinchuan and asked nervously, "Are we really going to attack by force?" Qinchuan nodded and said, "You just need to tell me if you want the Iron Tower race to be exterminated or if you just want to save Bela." Karo trembled with excitement when she heard Qinchuan's words. She said to Qinchuan, "Not everyone in the Iron Tower race is bad. My lord, you just need to kill the overlord of the Iron Tower race." Qinchuan grinned and said, "You are kind to think that way. However, the Iron Tower race is destined to be exterminated. After Auk and Rant die, the Wind race will take over this territory. Do you think they will let the Iron Tower race go?" Karo's expression became complicated when she heard Qinchuan's words. She knew very well that with the Wind race's hatred for the Iron Tower race, there was no way they would let anyone from the Iron Tower race go. "Alright, that's the end of the chat." Qinchuan turned to Argentin and Knight Serenity and said, "You two go and lure Auk and Rant out. We will deal with them in this universe and then find Bela. We will end this quickly." Chapter 1164. Iron Tower Planet, the tallest tower. In a spacious black iron palace, a 10-meter-tall figure sat on a huge black iron throne. He looked at the center of the hall with a playful gaze. There was a black iron cage there, and an enchanting figure was imprisoned inside. Because her head was dripping, no one could see the expression on her face. "Bela, are you still unwilling to submit?" The tall figure sitting on the black iron throne looked at Bela in the cage and spoke in an extremely low voice. Time slowly passed, but Bela had no intention of speaking at all. This made Auk angry. As the strongest person in the Iron Tower tribe and a well-known figure in the Holy Cluster, he felt that he had given enough face to Bela. He did not expect Bela to be so untactful. "Humph. I've already sent people to Rocky Star to find your sister. I'd like to see how long you can be so stubborn." Hearing Auk's words, Bela finally reacted. She raised her head and revealed a charming face. Her eyes, which should have been bright and moving, were now filled with hatred. She hated Auk so much that she wanted to tear him apart. "Kill me." Bela did not say any threatening words to Auk because she knew very well that she could not threaten Auk at all. The only thing she could do now was beg for death. As long as she died, she would no longer have to be humiliated by Auk, and she would not have to see her sister suffer such a miserable fate. Everything would end once and for all. Kill you? I didn't spend so much effort to bring you back just to kill you. Auk chuckled. When your sister comes to Iron Tower Planet, I'll let you make a choice. Auk looked at Bela lustfully and said, either you serve me or your sister serves me. One of you has to submit for the other. Ha! Hearing Auk's words, Bela's face was filled with despair. If she really had to face such a situation, she would really be finished. Boom! A terrifying energy wave pierced through the top of the tower and landed in the hall in front of the iron cage. Who is it? Auk looked sharply at the graceful figure slowly walking out of the dust. Judging from her aura, she was also an overlord of the form synthesis stage, but they had never seen her before. Knight Serenity ignored Auk. She looked at Bela in the cage and asked, Are you Bela? Hearing Knight Serenity's words, Bela asked, Do you know me? Knight Serenity nodded and said, I also know your sister Caro. She asked me to save you. Hearing Yi Yu's words, Bela's eyes, which were already filled with despair, suddenly lit up. She said with some excitement, Did my sister really ask you to come and save me? Where is she? Knight Serenity was just about to answer Bela when Auk's majestic body suddenly appeared behind her. He said in a deep voice, You're looking down on me too much. Boom. Auk punched out, but Knight Serenity turned around and blocked his punch. In the face of Auk's punch, which could penetrate the Earth's core, Knight Serenity only took 2 steps back. Auk looked at Knight Serenity in surprise. Then he sneered and said, Caro asked you to come? Does she think a mere overlord of the form synthesis stage like you can do anything to me? Ridiculous. If 1 isn't enough, how about 2? Argentin's figure slowly appeared behind Auk. Now, he was at the middle stage of the form synthesis stage, which was the same as Auk's. Seeing Argentin's appearance, Auk's expression became gloomy. He didn't expect Caro to be able to ask 2 overlords of the form synthesis stage to deal with him. Moreover, they looked very unfamiliar. He had never seen them before. So what if there are 2 of them? There are 2 of us. At this moment, another tall figure appeared in the palace. It was Auk's right-hand man, Rant, who was at the early stage of the form synthesis stage. Let's go. Su and Yi Yu saw that the situation was not good and immediately wanted to leave. In a flash, they left the hall and flew up into the sky. Auk and Rant chased after them without thinking. If they couldn't kill Argentin and Knight Serenity, they wouldn't be able to eat or sleep in peace. With the flying speed of overlords of the form synthesis stage, Argentin and Knight Serenity soon left the Iron Tower planet and arrived in the universe. Auk and Rant followed closely behind. When Argentin and Knight Serenity stopped beside Qinchuan and Lu Zi, Auk and Rant also stopped. Before leaving the Iron Tower planet, Auk and Rant had already noticed Qinchuan and Lu Zi standing in the universe. However, Qinchuan and Lu Zi were at the peak of the Insightful Void stage, while the other was at the peak of the Insightful Void stage. Therefore, they didn't take them seriously. When they saw Argentin and Knight Serenity stop beside Qinchuan, they realized that things weren't as simple as they thought. Qinchuan glanced at Auk and Rant, then asked Lu Zi, Are you sure you can do it? Lu Zi nodded and said, If you can fight above your level, there's no reason why I can't do it. Although Lu Zi's words didn't sound right, Qinchuan still decided to give Lu Zi a chance. After all, with him around, there wouldn't be any big problems. Qinchuan and Lu Zi didn't deliberately talk to each other or lower their voices. Auk and Rant could hear them clearly. At this moment, they realized that these people weren't just here to save Bela, but also to use them as practice. At this thought, Auk and Lan Ying's faces darkened. Who are you? Without knowing the other party's identity and background, Auk decided to use peaceful means before resorting to force. He wanted to figure out the other party's situation before deciding whether to make a move. However, Qinchuan had no intention of introducing himself to Ok. He said to Lu Zi, "Let's do it, lest something unexpected happens." Lu Zi nodded when she heard this. She immediately activated her purple star divine eyes and shot a hazy purple light at Ok and Rant. When Ok and Rant saw this scene, it was too late to dodge. "So fast!" Ok exclaimed. When he wanted to block it, he realized that the hazy purple light had directly penetrated his body. It didn't seem to cause any harm to him. Just as Ok was feeling a little strange, Qinchuan's figure suddenly appeared in front of him. He raised his hand and punched out with astonishing strength. Bang! Ok returned Qinchuan's punch almost without hesitation. However, what he didn't expect was that Qinchuan's strength was much greater than he had imagined. It was almost on par with Rant. Rumble! The battle between Ok and Qinchuan became more and more intense. The entire starry sky became their battlefield. At this moment, Ok didn't notice that except for him and Qinchuan, everyone else's figures had mysteriously disappeared. Chapter 1165. In the universe, Qinchuan and the others stood there, calmly watching Ok and Rant, who were frantically attacking each other. They felt like they were watching a show. This Rant is indeed a little weaker than that Ok. He's barely holding on. Qinchuan commented on the battle between Ok and Rant while curiously asking Lu Zi, in the illusion, "Who is their opponent?" "It's you," Lu Zi answered with a smile. When she cast the illusion, she didn't think too much and subconsciously brought Qinchuan into it. Hearing Lu Zi's words, Qinchuan didn't know whether to laugh or cry and asked, "Why me?" "Because I could only think of you at the moment," Lu Zi answered matter-of-factly. "Could it be that you were hoping for Night Serenity or Argentine?" Qinchuan shook his head and said, "Forget it, it's the same no matter who it is. It doesn't matter." Just as Qinchuan and Lu Zi were talking, Caro, who was anxious to rescue Bela, brought Bela, who had already escaped from the cage, back to everyone's side. She looked at Qinchuan gratefully and said, "Thank you, sir, for your help." Qinchuan chuckled and looked at Bela from head to toe. After that, he said, "You're quite pretty." Hearing Qinchuan's words, Bela subconsciously lowered her head, as if she didn't want Qinchuan to see her face. She had already experienced despair once, and she didn't want to enter the tiger's mouth after escaping from the wolf's mouth. Caro glanced at Ok and Rant, who were fighting fiercely, and asked with some doubt, "What's wrong with them?" Lu Zi smiled and said, "They're under the illusion and think of each other as opponents. They're trying their best to kill each other." Hearing Lu Zi's answer, Caro couldn't help but reveal a look of surprise. She didn't expect Ok and Rant to be under the illusion. To be able to make two overlords under the illusion at the same time, this method was definitely not ordinary. "Alright, it's about time. Let's end it," Qinchuan said to Argentine and Night Serenity, "Go kill them." Hearing Qinchuan's order, Night Serenity and Argentine immediately sprang into action. Each of them rushed toward a target and used their killing moves without holding back. Ok and Rant, who were under the illusion, didn't have any reaction at all. Night Serenity and Argentine took their lives in an instant. Seeing this scene, Caro and Bela revealed a look of awe. This method was really too terrifying. Two overlords of the body synthesis stage had died inexplicably just like that. "Qinchuan, what do you think of my illusion?" Lu Zi looked at Qinchuan with a smile and looked forward to Qinchuan's praise. Qinchuan glanced at Lu Zi and pondered for a moment before replying, "Although the power of your illusion is quite strong, it's only effective against people like Ok and Rant who are all brawn and no brains. Ordinary people will be able to quickly discover the problem and find a way to break the illusion. Moreover, this illusion takes too long to activate and its purpose is too obvious. Ordinary people will definitely not give you this opportunity. Lu Zi, who was originally looking forward to Qinchuan's praise, couldn't help but look astonished when she heard Qinchuan's words. She stared at Qinchuan for a long while before suddenly reaching out to pinch Qinchuan's arm. Although Qinchuan didn't feel any pain, he still grimaced and played along to make Lu Zi happy. He knew that what he said just now wasn't very nice and was too harsh, but what he said was the truth. If the opponents weren't the two idiots Awk and Rant, it would be very difficult for Lu Zi to succeed. Qinchuan coaxed the fuming Lu Zi back to the spaceship. Knight Serenity and Argentin followed closely behind, while Caro and Bela walked at the back. Even now, the two sisters still couldn't believe what they saw when they saw Awk and Rant's corpses. Awk and Rant, who were almost invincible in front of them, were dead just like that. Sister, who are they? Bela was very curious about the identity of Qinchuan and his party. She was very eager to know where Qinchuan and his party came from. Caro shook her head and said to Bela, I don't know, but I'm sure that they're not ordinary people. Let's not ask too much. Knowing too much won't do us any good. Bela nodded slightly at Caro's words and stopped asking about the origins of Qinchuan and his party. Instead, she began to think about how they should live the rest of their lives. Great Wind Planet, Feng Clan. Due to the arrival of a secret report, the leader of the Feng Clan, Baoling, called for a meeting among the higher-ups of the Feng Clan. All cultivators above the Dongshu stage were given the opportunity to participate in the meeting. When Baoling announced the contents of the secret report, it caused a huge uproar. I'll kill Awk and Rant. You guys will take the blame. The territory belongs to you. Iron Tower Clan cultivators below the Dongshu stage are not allowed to kill. This was the contents of the secret report. No one knew who sent it. At first, Baoling didn't think much of it and only thought that it was a prank. However, when the other party sent the photos of Awk and Rant's dead bodies in space, Baoling couldn't sit still anymore. If the contents of the secret report were true, didn't that mean that as long as they showed up and wiped out the Iron Tower Clan cultivators above the Dongshu stage, they would be able to obtain the territory of 200 galaxies? Silence! Baoling shouted in a low voice. The noisy meeting instantly quieted down. Everyone looked at Baoling and waited for him to speak. Facing everyone's gazes, Baoling said indifferently, I've already sent people to investigate this matter. If it's true, it'll be a great thing for our Feng Clan. Their enemies were killed and they gained a large territory. Was there anything better than this in the world? Leader, I suggest that we exterminate the Iron Tower Clan. We can't give them any chance to turn the tables. Baoling's face darkened when he heard this suggestion. Are you all blind? Didn't you see the contents of the secret report? Since the other party has the strength to kill Awk and Rant, do you think I can stop them? Hearing Baoling's words, the leader of the Feng Clan who suggested exterminating the Iron Tower Clan immediately broke out in cold sweat. He really wanted to slap himself to death. If Baoling were to accept his suggestion in a moment of hot-headedness, it might bring disaster to the Feng Clan. Buzz! Baoling's optical supercomputer suddenly vibrated. Baoling immediately turned it on. When he saw the message he just received, he couldn't help but excitedly project the message for everyone to see. It's confirmed that Awk and Rant are dead. The Iron Tower Clan is in chaos. Seeing this message, the entire Feng Clan celebrated. Baoling looked at the cheering crowd and said in a deep voice, Elders, listen to my orders. Immediately select people and prepare to head to the Iron Tower planet. Prepare to take over the Iron Tower Clan's territory. Also, do not attack the Iron Tower Clan members below the Dongshu stage who don't resist. This is an ironclad order. Chapter 1166. Inside the spaceship, Caro and Bela stood in front of Qinchuan somewhat cautiously, as if they didn't know what to say to Qinchuan, but also wanted to say something. Chuan looked at Karo and Bela's bashful expressions and chuckled. If you have anything to say, just say it. There's no need to hesitate. Hearing Chuan's words, Karo looked at Chuan with a complicated gaze and asked, Sir, is there anything else you need us sisters to do? Chuan smiled and replied, Not at the moment. Hearing Chuan's answer, Karo's face showed obvious disappointment, while Bela lowered her head even more. Chuan was a little surprised when he saw this and asked, Shouldn't you feel lucky? You are already free. Sir, we are indeed free, but we are now homeless. Karo smiled bitterly and said to Chuan, We don't know where to go. Before this, Karo's mind was filled with thoughts of how to rescue Bela, but when they really rescued Bela, when they needed to think about the future, they found that they seemed to have nowhere to go. They couldn't go back to Mezu, and Rocky Star was no longer safe. After thinking about it, they found that the only place that could make them feel at ease now was by Chuan's side, so they hoped that Chuan could take them in, but obviously, Chuan didn't seem to have this intention. Chuan looked at Bela curiously and said, According to your description, Bela should be a very strong person, but why is the Bela I see a somewhat inferior and even cowardly person? Hearing Chuan's words, Karo sighed helplessly and said to Chuan, Sorry, Bela wasn't like this before. Chuan looked at Karo and said, I understand what you mean, you want me to take you in. This isn't impossible, but I want to see a proud and strong Bela, not this weak and boneless Bela. Karo looked at Bela with some hesitation. She also wanted to see the Bela of the past, but in the past year, Bela had experienced too much pain, and the pride in her heart had long been wiped clean. Seeing Karo and Bela's silence, Chuan said to the two, Karo, you can help Bela adjust her condition first. When the time is right, come and see me. Thank you, sir. Karo looked at Chuan gratefully and then left with Bela. After Karo and Bela left, Lu Zi looked at Chuan and asked, Have you already thought of keeping them? Chuan shook his head and replied, Although it's cruel to tell the truth, keeping them by our side is reasonable. Other than being eye candy, there's no use in keeping them by our side. A peak insightful void cultivator and a peak insightful void cultivator were already a force to be reckoned with in an ordinary power, but in front of Chuan, to be honest, they weren't worth his attention. Although Chuan and Lu Zi were peak insightful void cultivators and peak insightful void cultivators respectively, their battle prowess couldn't be measured by the standards of ordinary cultivators. Night Serenity and Argentine were overlords of the body integration stage, and Mysterious Snake was a peak body integration stage overlord. Each was stronger than the other, so Chuan really didn't have much interest in Karo and Bela. But since Karo and Bela wanted to stay, Chuan wouldn't refuse. However, Karo and Bela had to prove their worth. Chuan didn't have much hope for Karo, but he was still somewhat interested in Bela. From Karo's description of Bela in the past, Bela should be a very strong, opinionated, and capable person. But when Chuan really met Bela, he discovered that although Bela hadn't lost her virginity to Auk, her willpower had almost been destroyed by Auk. Such a Bela was almost equivalent to a cripple, and had no value to Chuan. These words were cold-blooded, but this was the bloody reality of the universe. Chuan had never been a philanthropist. Apart from his own people, he had always sought benefits from others. If Bela could regain her confidence and find her past self, Chuan didn't mind giving Bela a chance to be loyal to him. But if Bela couldn't do it, then they would part ways when they left the Holy Cluster. The spaceship stopped not long after leaving Iron Tower Planet. This was because Chuan unexpectedly discovered that he had entered a wonderful state. There were faint signs of him breaking through to the peak of the Dongshu realm. On the third day of his stay in the universe, Chuan finally woke up from that mysterious feeling. Following that, he welcomed his own small calamity. When they saw the 9 lightning bolts falling, Karo and Bela were extremely shocked. They had never seen 9 lightning bolts during a minor tribulation. Bela, is this also considered the mysterious Heaven 9-stage tribulation? Kara wasn't too sure. Did the mysterious Heaven 9-stage tribulation also exist in the minor tribulation? Shouldn't a normal person only go through 3 or 6 lightning bolts? Bela shook her head and said to Caro, I'm not sure either. But among the people I know, no one has ever gone through a minor tribulation with 9 lightning bolts. Caro turned to Bela and said with a complicated tone, Bela, we can tell Master that you went through the mysterious Heaven 9-stage tribulation when you were at the nascent soul stage. You're a genius and shouldn't be buried. Hearing Caro's words, Bela couldn't help but fall silent. Of course, she knew that she was a genius. However, it was because of this reputation that she and her sister got into trouble. If it wasn't for this, they wouldn't have left Meizu and become mercenaries wandering in space. Seeing Bela fall silent, Caro couldn't help but sigh. She knew that Bela must have suffered a lot in the past year. That was why she became like this. She really didn't want to see Bela sink into depravity. She hoped that she could save Bela from the shadow that Ok had created. Just as Caro and Bela were whispering to each other, Qin Chuan returned to the spaceship. What welcomed him was Lu Zi's congratulations. Congratulations, you're now at the same level as me. You've finally caught up to me. Hearing Lu Zi's words, Qin Chuan smiled and said, I originally thought that breaking through from the peak of the Dongshu realm to the peak of the Dongshu realm would be difficult. But now, it seems that it wasn't the case. It was a little too easy. Chapter 1167. If others heard Qin Chuan's words, they would be so depressed that they would vomit blood. Many people were stuck at the peak of the Dongshu realm and couldn't break through to the exceptional Dongshu realm even after working hard for a lifetime. However, Qin Chuan broke through to the exceptional Dongshu realm not long after he broke through the peak of the Dongshu realm. It was as easy and natural as eating and drinking. He didn't encounter any obstacles at all. Maybe this was called showing off. Originally, Qin Chuan thought that after breaking through to the exceptional Dongshu realm, he would have some feelings about the form synthesis stage. But now he found that it was not the case at all. He was still confused about the form synthesis stage. Therefore, Qin Chuan called Argentine and Night Serenity over. In the past, Qin Chuan had never asked anyone what it was like to be in the form synthesis stage. It was not because he was not curious, but because it was meaningless and useless to know too much at that time. Now it was different. He had reached the realm where he could know these things. Qin Chuan looked at Night Serenity and asked, What's the difference between the form synthesis stage and the exceptional Dongshu realm? After hearing Qin Chuan's question, Night Serenity thought for a while and answered, In the exceptional Dongshu realm, the body is the body, the soul is the soul, and the spiritual power is the spiritual power. In the form synthesis stage, the body is the body, the soul, and the dantian is the spiritual power. After hearing Night Serenity's answer, Qin Chuan thought for a while and responded, So, in the form synthesis stage, the body, the soul, the spiritual power, and the dantian are all integrated into one? Night Serenity nodded and said to Qin Chuan, This is the form synthesis stage in my understanding. It's also the origin of the name form synthesis stage. After hearing Night Serenity's answer, Qin Chuan was lost in thought. In the past, to advance from the qi refining stage to the foundation stage, one only needed to lay the foundation. The real change was in the gold core stage. After the gold core stage, the gold core was born in the dantian. After the gold core stage, the nascent soul was formed in the yuanying stage, which was equivalent to having a second life. One could travel between heaven and earth with the help of the power of the yuanying stage. When one reached the deification stage, one had to comprehend the power of the Dharma. After that, in the Dongshu realm, the yuanying stage, one could fight with the help of the power of the universe. in the previous realm, everything could be clearly separated. The physical body was the physical body, and the power released by the physical body was pure force. The spiritual power was the spiritual power, and it could be used to release spells. It could be used to take people's heads from thousands of miles away. The dantian was used to store spiritual power, and the gold core was the source of spiritual power. The brain was used to store spiritual power, and it was the source of spirit. The meridians were used to allow the spiritual power to flow. All of these were clearly divided and organized. However, it was different in the form synthesis stage. Everything was mixed together. However, it was not simply mixed together. Instead, it was integrated into one, like rivers flowing into the sea. The strength of the form synthesis stage was no longer divided into physical strength, spiritual strength, and spiritual strength. It was pure strength. It could be spiritual strength, or physical strength. It could be spiritual strength, or physical strength. It could play a role in all aspects. Under the form synthesis stage, if one's physical body died, his soul could still transcend. However, above the form synthesis stage, once one fell, he would die directly. So, was the form synthesis stage good? Of course it was good. Compared with the dongshu stage, the form synthesis stage could be said to be a sublimation of life. There were too many benefits to count. After thinking about it, Qinchuan turned to Argentin and asked, "What do you think about the form synthesis stage?" Argentin, who had thought about it carefully, replied to Qinchuan's question, "In my opinion, the form synthesis stage is called the overlords of the universe because only the overlords of the form synthesis stage are qualified to be the masters of this universe. At least, they have the foundation and ability to do so. Everyone under the form synthesis stage is just a pawn. Of course, there are very few people as strange as you. According to common sense, the overlords of the form synthesis stage could absolutely crush the cultivators at the lower stages. However, Qinchuan was a special case. He could not be measured by common sense. Qinchuan looked at Argentin and Knight Serenity. Then he asked, "What do you think is the most important thing to pay attention to if you want to reach the form synthesis stage?" Argentin replied without hesitation, "The power of law." Knight Serenity replied, "The fusion of power." Qinchuan was slightly stunned by the two different answers. But soon, Argentin and Knight Serenity said in unison, "She's right." Qinchuan turned to Knight Serenity and said, "You'd better explain it in detail." Knight Serenity nodded and said to Qinchuan, "The form synthesis stage may be a complicated stage for the cultivators at the dongshu stage. However, for the overlords of the form synthesis stage, this stage is much simpler than the other stages. First of all, the fusion of power. Once all the power is fused together, the cultivators at the dongshu stage will naturally advance to the form synthesis stage. However, the form synthesis stage cultivators are the weakest kind of form synthesis stage cultivators. They have an absolute advantage over the cultivators at the dongshu stage. However, they are very weak in front of the form synthesis stage cultivators like us who have fused the power of law. Qinchuan was a little puzzled when he heard this. He asked, "You mean there are two stages of the form synthesis stage?" Knight Serenity nodded and then shook his head. He said, "Your understanding is not wrong. However, it is not completely correct. As I said, the biggest difference between the form synthesis stage and the dongshu stage is the fusion of power. This fusion of power does not only include the powers I mentioned before. The power of law is also a kind of power." When he spoke up to here, Yiyu paused for a moment, and then he said to Qinchuan, "However, you must be extremely careful when fusing with the laws." Seeing the serious expression on Knight Serenity's face, Qinchuan's expression also became serious. He asked, "Is it because of the ultimate existence of the domain of law?" Yiyu nodded and said to Qinchuan, "When it comes to fusing with the power of laws, because of the greatness of the existence of the highest level. If we fuse with the power of laws grasped by the existence of the highest level, then we will become the vassal of the existence of the highest level. When you face the existence of the highest level one day, you won't be able to resist at all and will become their servant. Even if you're unwilling, you won't be able to change it. Hearing Knight Serenity's words, Qinchuan frowned and said, "Then how do we know if there is an ultimate existence in this domain of law?" "That depends on what kind of domain of law you choose," Knight Serenity said to Qinchuan. "For example, the law of fire I chose does not have an ultimate existence in this domain of law because there is a feeling in the unseen world." You're tuning in to the Phoenix Knights YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.